The night Madeline Carter lost everything, she drove straight into a blizzard with nothing but rage keeping her warm. Her partner's betrayal still burned. His cold rejection of their unborn child, the way he'd thrown her out like trash. The Montana highway blurred beneath frozen tears until the wheel jerked, the car spun, and metal screamed against ice. Then silence. Snow piling on the windshield, blood warm against her temple. She was dying out here, and nobody was coming, except someone did. Stay with me through Madeline's story, from the edge of death to a dangerous new world. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey reaches. Hit like if you're ready for part 1. The headlights died first. Madeline Carter sat slumped against the deployed airbag, tasting copper and feeling the cold creep through the shattered driver's side window. Her Honda was nose down in a ditch, steam hissing from the crumpled hood into the freezing Montana night. She tried the ignition. Click, click, nothing. No, 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 her voice cracked. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. before it flickered out. She'd been driving for 3 hours since Marcus threw her out. 3 hours of crying so hard she could barely see the road. 3 hours replaying his words in her head like a knife twisting. The kid isn't mine. I don't care what you say. Get out. She'd stood there in the doorway of the apartment they'd shared for 2 years, her pregnancy test still in her shaking hand, watching him pack her things into garbage bags. When she tried to argue, tried to make him understand, he'd called her a liar, said she'd probably been cheating, said he wanted her gone before midnight. So she left. Stupid. She should have fought harder, should have made him listen, should have done 100 things differently. Instead, she'd thrown those garbage bags in her car and just started driving with no plan, no destination, just away. Away from Billings, away from Marcus, away from the life that had just imploded. Now she was going to die in a ditch because she'd been too angry and hurt to pay attention to the weather warnings. Madeline pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, feeling the baby flutter inside her. 16 weeks. Just starting to show, just starting to feel real. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. She tried her phone. No signal. Of course not. She was somewhere between nowhere and nothing on Highway 89, and the snow was coming down so thick she couldn't see 10 feet beyond the car. The temperature was already dropping inside the vehicle. Her breath made fog clouds. Think. She needed to think. The engine wouldn't start, but she might be able to run the hazard lights off the battery for a while. Except nobody was driving in this weather. She hadn't seen another car for the last 40 minutes before the crash. And her coat was a thin spring jacket because she'd grabbed it without thinking, because her brain had been too full of Marcus's face when he told her to leave. Madeline tried the door. It opened 6 inches before jamming against the snowbank. She shoved harder, grunting with effort, managed to force it wide enough to squeeze through. The wind hit her like a fist. She gasped, immediately feeling the cold slice through her jeans and sweater. The highway stretched empty in both directions, just a ribbon of white with darker white on either side where the forest pressed close. No lights, no houses, nothing. She was going to freeze to death out here. The thought should have terrified her more than it did. Instead, she felt strangely calm as she climbed back into the car and pulled the door shut. At least it would be quiet. At least she wouldn't have to hear Marcus's voice anymore, wouldn't have to figure out how to raise a baby alone with no money and no family. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 19. She had an aunt in Oregon she hadn't spoken to in 5 years. No siblings. No close friends. Marcus had made sure of that, always finding reasons why her friendships were unhealthy or why people didn't really like her. God, she'd been so stupid. Madeline wrapped her arms around herself and closed her eyes. The cold was making her drowsy. She knew that was bad, knew she should stay awake, but her head hurt from where it had hit the window, and she was so tired. So tired of fighting, tired of trying, tired of being the only one who cared. Maybe this was easier. She let the darkness pull her down. The sound of a car engine dragged her back to consciousness. Madeline's eyes flew open. She couldn't feel her hands anymore. The windows were completely frosted over, turning the car into an ice tomb. But that sound, that was definitely an engine, close, getting closer. She tried to move and couldn't. Her limbs were lead, her brain felt stuffed with cotton. Move. She had to move. With enormous effort, she raised one arm and slapped it against the window. The sound was pathetic, barely a tap. She tried again, harder, forcing her frozen muscles to cooperate. The third hit actually made a thump. "Help!" she tried to call out, but it came out as a whisper. The engine sound stopped. A door slammed. Footsteps crunched through snow, fast, purposeful. "Definitely a car here. Anyone inside?" Multiple voices, multiple people. Madeline tried to respond but couldn't make her mouth work. Then someone was at the driver's side window, brushing away snow. A face appeared, dark hair, sharp features, eyes that went wide when they spotted her. "Christ, Marco, get the blankets. She's hypothermic." The door wrenched open with a screech of metal. Cold air flooded in, somehow colder than what was already there. Hands touched her face, her neck, checking for a pulse. "Can you hear me?" The voice was male, accented faintly. Italian, maybe. "Stay with me. We're getting you out." She wanted to answer, but the words wouldn't come. He turned his head, shouting orders to someone she couldn't see. "Careful with her. She's pregnant. Need to move fast. She doesn't have long." Hands slid under her arms, under her knees, lifting her out of the car. The movement made her head spin. She caught a glimpse of a large black SUV idling on the road, headlights cutting through the blizzard. Two other men were pulling bags from the back. The one carrying her, the one with the Italian accent, moved quickly but carefully toward the SUV. She could feel how strong he was, the way he held her weight like she was nothing. Up close she could see he was maybe mid-30s, expensively dressed despite the weather, his dark coat worth more than her entire wardrobe. "Hospital," she managed to whisper. "Need. Too far. We'll take care of you." That wasn't what she meant, but she couldn't argue. He slid into the back seat of the SUV with her still in his arms, and someone immediately draped heavy blankets over them both. The interior was blessedly warm. She couldn't stop shaking. "Drive," the man ordered, and the SUV lurched forward. Madeline tried to focus on his face, but her vision kept blurring. "Who?" "Alessandro," he said. "My name is Alessandro. You're safe now." "Baby?" "I know. We'll check. Just stay awake for me." She tried. She really did. But the warmth was making the exhaustion impossible to fight, and Alessandro's arms were steady around her, and she was so incredibly tired. The last thing she remembered was his voice, calm and commanding, giving instructions she couldn't quite follow. Then nothing. She woke up in a bed that wasn't hers. Madeline's eyes opened slowly, taking in an unfamiliar ceiling. Unfamiliar walls painted a soft cream color. Unfamiliar heavy curtains drawn over what looked like floor-to-ceiling windows. The bed beneath her was massive and extremely comfortable, piled with down comforters. An IV line ran from her arm to a bag hanging on a stand. For a moment she just lay there, confused and disoriented, her mind struggling to piece together where she was and how she'd gotten there. Then it came back in fragments. The crash, the cold, Marcus, the man who'd pulled her from the car, Alessandro. She sat up too quickly and immediately regretted it as the room spun. A hand pressed gently against her shoulder. "Easy. You've been out for 18 hours. Madeline turned her head to find a woman sitting in a chair beside the bed. Late 50s, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, dressed like a nurse in scrubs, but with an air of competence that went beyond medical training. "Where am I?" Madeline's voice came out rough. "Mr. Vieri's estate. I'm Angela. I've been monitoring your condition." "Estate?" Madeline looked around the room again, noticing details she'd missed. The quality of the furniture, the artwork on the walls, the chandelier overhead. "This is someone's house?" "Yes. You were severely hypothermic when they brought you in. Hospital was over an hour away in that weather. Mr. Vieri made the call to treat you here." Madeline's hand went automatically to her stomach. Angela noticed and smiled. "The baby's fine. Strong heartbeat. You're approximately 16 weeks along, correct?" "Yes." Relief flooded through her so intense it made her dizzy. "You're sure? The baby's okay?" "Completely sure. We've been monitoring both of you carefully. You'll need to rest for a few more days, but you and the child are healthy." Madeline closed her eyes, feeling tears leak out. The baby was okay. After everything, after the crash and the cold and almost dying, the baby was okay. "Thank you," she whispered. Angela patted her hand. Thank Mr. Vieri. He's the one who found you. I'd like to. Thank him, I mean. Is he here? I'll let him know you're awake. Angela stood and checked the IV bag. Are you hungry? When did you last eat? Madeline had to think about it. Yesterday morning? The day before yesterday now, I guess. Angela's expression turned disapproving in a way that was somehow motherly. We'll fix that. I'll have something brought up. She left, her footsteps quiet on the plush carpet. Madeline lay back against the pillows, her mind racing. Estate, staff, private medical care. Whoever this Alessandro person was, he had serious money. She looked around for her phone and found it on the nightstand, plugged into a charger. 8 missed calls, all from Marcus. A dozen texts, progressing from angry to worried to angry again. She deleted them without reading and turned the phone face down. She didn't want to think about Marcus right now, didn't want to think about the apartment she couldn't go back to, the job she'd probably lost after not showing up, the complete disaster her life had become. Just for a few more minutes, she wanted to lie here in this absurdly comfortable bed and pretend everything was going to be okay. A knock came at the door. Come in, Madeline called, expecting Angela with food. Instead, Alessandro Vieri walked in. He looked different than her fragmented memory of him, less like a blur of sharp features and more like an actual person. Tall, lean build, probably Italian based on the olive complexion and dark features. Expensive clothes that fit too well to be off the rack. Mid-30s like she'd thought, with the kind of face that was handsome in a harsh way, all strong angles and intensity. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Dark, almost black, and far too observant. Eyes that saw everything and gave away nothing. Miss Carter. His voice was the same as she remembered, smooth, accented, controlled. I'm glad to see you awake. You saved my life. It sounded inadequate even as she said it. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. He waved a hand dismissively as he pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. You were fortunate we came along when we did. Another hour and the outcome would have been different. Why were you even on that road? In that weather? Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. Business. We were coming back from a meeting in Great Falls. Lucky for me. Indeed. He studied her for a moment. Angela tells me you and the child are both recovering well. That's good news. Thanks to you and your staff. Madeline gestured around the room. This is incredible. I don't know how I'll ever repay you for all this. No repayment necessary. I'm simply glad we could help. He leaned back slightly. Though I do have some questions, if you're feeling well enough to answer them. Madeline tensed. Of course he had questions. She was a stranger who'd appeared out of a blizzard, and he'd taken her into his home. He had every right to want answers. What do you want to know? Let's start with what you were doing driving alone in a blizzard at midnight. The directness of it caught her off guard. She'd expected small talk first, the polite dance around the real questions. Alessandro didn't seem interested in dancing. I was leaving Billings, she said carefully. The father of my baby and I had a fight. I left. I wasn't really thinking clearly. He let you leave in that weather? The way he said it made it sound like an accusation, but not directed at her. Madeline found herself answering honestly. He threw me out, said the baby wasn't his, called me a liar, packed my stuff and told me to be gone by midnight. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold. I see. And where were you planning to go? I don't know. I didn't have a plan. I needed to get away from there. She felt tears threatening again and forced them back. I know it was stupid. I should have waited until morning, should have checked the weather, should have done 1,000 things differently. I could have killed my baby because I was too upset to think straight. But you didn't. His voice was matter-of-fact. You're both alive. That's what matters. Because you found me. Yes. He stood, moving to look out the window. The curtains were still drawn, but he seemed to be looking at something beyond them. Which brings me to my next question. Do you have somewhere to go? Family? Friends? The question she'd been dreading. Madeline shook her head. My parents are dead. I have an aunt in Oregon, but we're not close. My friends... She trailed off. I don't really have friends. Marcus didn't like me spending time with other people. Alessandro turned back to face her, and she couldn't read his expression at all. I see. And your job? I was a translator for a tech company in Billings, freelance. I worked from home mostly, so I guess technically I still have it? Except I haven't checked my email in 2 days, and I probably missed deadlines and they've probably already replaced me. The words came out bitter. I'm great at destroying my own life, apparently. What languages? The sudden shift confused her. What? What languages do you translate? Oh, Italian, French, and Spanish. I studied linguistics in college. Before my parents died and I had to drop out to work full-time, she didn't add. Something that might have been interest flickered across Alessandro's face. Italian is your specialty? Yeah, I did a semester abroad in Rome. It's the language I'm most fluent in after English. He was quiet for a long moment, clearly thinking about something. Madeline waited, unsure what was happening. I have a proposition for you, he said finally. I own several businesses that deal with international clients. I'm always in need of competent translators, particularly for Italian correspondence and contracts. The work would be steady, well paid, and you could do most of it remotely. Madeline stared at him. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity. You clearly need income and stability, especially with a child on the way. I need someone with your skills. It would be mutually beneficial. You don't even know me. I could be terrible at my job. But you're not. It wasn't a question. Angela mentioned you were talking in your sleep. Your Italian was flawless, accent and all. Most Americans can't manage that even with years of study. She felt herself flush. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay here while you recover. Angela wants you off your feet for at least another 3 days, and the weather is still poor. Consider it part of my medical care. I can't just stay in your house. Why not? He tilted his head slightly. You have somewhere better to be? The question wasn't cruel, just practical. And he was right. She had nowhere to go. Her car was totaled, assuming it was even still where she'd crashed. She had no money for a hotel, no friends to call. Marcus would slam the door in her face if she went back, and she'd rather freeze again than give him the satisfaction. I don't want to impose, she said quietly. You're not. I have more rooms than I know what to do with, and Angela enjoys having someone to fuss over. He moved toward the door. Rest. We can discuss the job offer later when you're feeling stronger. For now, just focus on recovering. Mr. Vieri... Alessandro, he corrected. We saved each other the trouble of formal introductions when I pulled you out of that car. Despite everything, Madeline felt a small smile tug at her lips. Alessandro, thank you. Really? I know I keep saying it, but I mean it. He paused at the door, looking back at her. For just a moment, his expression softened. You're welcome, Madeline. Get some rest. Then he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him. Madeline lay back against the pillows, her mind spinning. A job offer. A place to stay. Medical care. All from a complete stranger who'd pulled her out of a snowbank. It felt too good to be true. But then again, her life had just spectacularly fallen apart. Maybe she was due for some good luck. She closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her again despite having just woken up. She'd think about all of this later. Right now, she was warm and safe, and the baby was okay. That was enough. Madeline spent the next 3 days in bed on Angela's orders, drifting between sleep and waking, eating when food appeared and trying not to think too hard about her situation. The room she was staying in was on the second floor of what she was beginning to understand was a very large house. When she was feeling stronger, she'd gotten out of bed long enough to look out the windows. The estate sat on extensive grounds surrounded by forest, with a long driveway leading to a gate she could just barely see in the distance. Snow covered everything in a pristine blanket that would have been beautiful if she didn't associate it with nearly dying. She saw Alessandro twice more during those 3 days. Once when he stopped by to drop off her belongings from the car, her pathetic garbage bags of clothes, her laptop, her purse. He didn't comment on the bags, just set them down and asked if she needed anything. The second time was longer, a conversation about the job offer. The work would involve translating business correspondence, contracts, and occasionally sitting in on video conferences to provide real-time translation, he explained, sitting in the chair that seemed to be his usual spot. Most of it can be done remotely, but there would be occasional requests for in-person work if you're available. What kind of businesses? Madeline asked. Import-export primarily. I have interests in shipping, logistics, some manufacturing. International trade requires constant communication with partners across Europe. It sounded legitimate, normal. So why did she have the nagging sense that he wasn't telling her everything? The pay would be $60,000 a year to start, Alessandro continued, with benefits including health insurance. Given your condition, I imagine that's relevant. Madeline nearly choked. $60,000 was more than she'd made in the last 2 years combined with her freelance work. That's very generous. It's market rate for someone with your skills. I don't believe in underpaying competent people. He studied her. You seem hesitant. I'm just wondering why you're doing this. You don't know me. For all you know, I'm completely incompetent. I'm an excellent judge of character, and I have good instincts about people. He leaned forward slightly. You're intelligent, educated, and despite what you've been through, you're still fighting. Those are qualities I value. Or I'm desperate and you know it. That too. He didn't deny it. I'm offering you a lifeline, Madeline. Whether you take it is up to you. But I'm not doing this out of pity. I genuinely need someone with your skills, and I believe you'll do good work. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe this was real and not some kind of trap. But Marcus had taught her not to trust easily, especially when something seemed too good to be true. What's the catch? She asked bluntly. Alessandro smiled, and it was the first time she'd seen anything like warmth from him. The catch is that my business sometimes operates on strange hours. International clients mean middle-of-the-night phone calls, urgent contracts that need translating by morning. It's not a 9-to-5 job. I can handle odd hours, and the work is confidential. Everything you translate, everything you see, stays between us and the clients. No discussing it with friends, family, anyone. That made sense for business. Okay. Then we have a deal? Madeline took a deep breath. This was crazy. She was about to accept a job from a man she'd known for 3 days, a man who lived in a fortress-like estate with staff and money and secrets she didn't understand. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that this was a bad idea. But the alternative was going back to Billings with nothing. No apartment, no money, no support. Trying to find work while pregnant and homeless. Possibly losing the baby because she couldn't afford medical care. Yes, she heard herself say, we have a deal. Alessandro extended his hand and she shook it, his grip firm and warm. Excellent. We'll draw up a formal contract this week. In the meantime, keep resting. I'll have Angela continue monitoring you and the baby. I can't stay here indefinitely, Madeline protested. I need to find my own place. There's a guest house on the property. Small, 2 bedrooms, fully furnished. You're welcome to use it for as long as you need. She stared at him. I can't afford. Consider it part of your compensation package. You'll be working from home most of the time anyway. Makes sense for you to be on site when needed. It was too much, way too much. But Madeline found herself nodding anyway, too overwhelmed to argue. Alessandro seemed to have an answer for everything, a solution to every problem she could think of, which should have made her more suspicious, not less. After he left, she sat on the bed and tried to process what she'd just agreed to. A job, housing, security, everything she needed handed to her by a stranger. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus. Where the hell are you? Your stuff is still here, and I want it gone. She deleted it and blocked his number. Whatever this was with Alessandro, whatever she'd just gotten herself into, it had to be better than going back to that. It had to be. Oh. On the 4th day, Angela declared her well enough to move around. Madeline took her time getting dressed in clothes from her garbage bags, jeans that were getting tight around the waist, a sweater that had seen better days. Everything she owned looked shabby in this place. She made her way downstairs carefully, following the sound of voices. The house was even larger than she'd realized. All high ceilings and expensive furniture and artwork that probably cost more than most people made in a year. She felt completely out of place. The voices led her to a large kitchen where Angela was directing 2 other people, a younger woman and a man, both in casual clothes, both moving with the efficient purpose of staff who knew exactly what they were doing. "Good morning," Angela said when she spotted Madeline. "How are you feeling?" "Better? Much better." Madeline hovered in the doorway, unsure if she should come in. "I don't want to be in the way." "Nonsense. Sit." Angela pointed at the kitchen island. "You need to eat. Maria, can you make our guests some breakfast?" The younger woman, Maria, nodded and immediately started pulling things from the refrigerator. Madeline perched on one of the bar stools, feeling awkward. "Is Alessandro around?" she asked. "He's in his office. He works from home most days." Angela was organizing medication bottles on the counter. "He said to tell you to take it easy for the rest of the week. No work until Monday." "I feel fine, really. I could start Monday," Angela said firmly in a tone that suggested arguing would be pointless. Maria slid a plate in front of Madeline. Scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit. It looked amazing. When was the last time someone had cooked for her? "Thank you," she said quietly. She ate in silence, listening to Angela and Maria discuss meal planning for the week. The man, whose name was apparently Marco, came and went, carrying in grocery bags. It all felt surreal, like she'd stumbled into someone else's life. After breakfast, Angela showed her to the guest house Alessandro had mentioned. It sat about 50 yards from the main house, a small cottage-style building that was bigger than the apartment she'd shared with Marcus. 2 bedrooms, a full bathroom, a living area with a fireplace, and a small kitchen. Fully furnished like he'd said, decorated in the same expensive but understated style as the main house. "Mr. Vieri had it cleaned and stocked for you," Angela explained, opening the refrigerator to show it full of food. "Everything you need should be here, but if you think of anything else, just ask." Madeline walked through the space in a daze. This was hers? She could stay here? "The internet password is on the counter," Angela continued, "and there's a phone system that connects to the main house. Just pick up and dial 0 if you need anything." "This is too much," Madeline said faintly. Angela gave her a knowing look. "Mr. Vieri is a generous employer. You'll get used to it." After Angela left, Madeline sat on the couch and looked around her new home. Temporary home, she corrected herself. This wasn't permanent. This was just until she got on her feet, saved some money, figured out what she was doing. But as she sat there in the quiet, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn she didn't completely understand. Alessandro Vieri had appeared out of nowhere, saved her life, and offered her everything she needed exactly when she needed it. Nobody did that without a reason. She pulled out her laptop and, for the first time since the crash, opened her email. Dozens of messages from her old clients, most of them angry about missed deadlines. She responded to each one apologetically, explaining there had been an emergency, offering to make up the work if they still wanted her. Then she opened a new browser window and typed, "Alessandro Vieri, Montana." The search results were surprisingly sparse. A few business registrations for import-export companies, a couple of mentions in shipping industry publications, but no social media, no photographs, no personal information at all. For someone who apparently had this much money, he kept a very low profile. She tried different search terms. Vieri shipping, Vieri logistics, Vieri import-export. Each search gave her fragments of information, but nothing that painted a complete picture. The businesses seemed legitimate, scattered across several states, all dealing in international trade of various kinds. Nothing obviously illegal, nothing that raised red flags. So why did she still feel like she was missing something? A knock at the door made her jump. She closed the laptop and went to answer it, finding Alessandro standing on her small porch. "Settling in?" he asked. "Yes, thank you. This place is amazing." "Good." He glanced past her into the cottage. "I wanted to check that you had everything you needed. Angela tends to be thorough, but she sometimes forgets details." "No, it's perfect, really." Madeline hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you doing all this? And don't say it's just because you need a translator. You could hire anyone." Alessandro was quiet for a moment, and she got the sense he was deciding how much truth to give her. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "I found you dying in a snowbank, carrying a child you're planning to raise alone. The father abandoned you. You have no family, no support system, no resources. I have all of those things and more than I need." He met her eyes. "Maybe I'm doing this because I can, because I have the means to help and I choose to use them. Does there need to be another reason? Most people don't think that way. I'm not most people. There was something in the way he said it, an edge that made her think he was talking about more than just charity. But before she could push further, he stepped back. I'll let you rest. Remember, no work until Monday. Doctor's orders. He was gone before she could respond, walking back toward the main house with his hands in his pockets. Madeline watched him go, her mind full of questions she didn't know how to ask. She went back inside and opened her laptop again, staring at the sparse search results. Alessandro Vieri was either exactly what he appeared to be, a wealthy businessman with a charitable streak, or he was very, very good at hiding who he really was. Either way, she'd already made her choice. She'd accepted his help, his job, his protection. For better or worse, her life was now tangled up with his. She just hoped she hadn't made a terrible mistake. The weekend passed quietly. Madeline spent most of it in the guest house, unpacking her meager belongings and trying to make the space feel like hers. Saturday afternoon, a delivery truck arrived with boxes addressed to her. When she opened them, she found maternity clothes, jeans, sweaters, dresses, all in her size, all good quality. There was a note from Alessandro. You'll need these soon. Consider it an advance on your first paycheck. She should have been grateful. Instead, she felt uncomfortable. The gifts were piling up. The job, the house, the clothes. Every new thing made her feel more indebted, more tangled in obligations she didn't fully understand. But she kept the clothes. She needed them. Sunday morning, she woke to find a contract slid under her door. The employment agreement was straightforward. Salary, benefits, expectations, all laid out in clear language. She read it 3 times, looking for catches, and found none. It seemed legitimate. She signed it. Monday morning, Angela brought her a laptop and a stack of files. Mr. Vieri thought you'd want to start with these. They're lower priority, good for getting back into the rhythm. No rush, just work at your own pace. The files were business correspondence, exactly like Alessandro had described. Letters from Italian partners about shipping schedules, customs documentation, contract negotiations, all perfectly normal. Madeline threw herself into the work, grateful for something to focus on besides her spiraling thoughts. Translation had always calmed her, the puzzle of finding the right words in another language, maintaining tone and intent across cultural boundaries. She was good at this. It was one of the few things she was confident about. By Wednesday, she'd finished the initial stack and asked for more. Angela delivered another batch with an approving nod. Mr. Vieri says you work fast. He's impressed. It's not that hard, Madeline demurred. Still, he values competence. Thursday afternoon, Alessandro himself appeared at her door with a new assignment. I need this translated by tomorrow morning. It's a contract with a client in Naples. Time sensitive. Madeline took the file and skimmed it. Standard shipping contract, nothing unusual. I can have it done by tonight. Tomorrow is fine. Don't push yourself. I'm pregnant, not broken. The words came out sharper than she intended. Alessandro's eyebrows rose slightly. Point taken. Tonight then, if you're capable. She finished the translation by 10 p.m. and emailed it to him. His response came back within minutes. Excellent work. Thank you. Friday, she was settling into a routine. Wake up, work on translations, break for lunch, more work, dinner, sleep. It was simple and structured and exactly what she needed. No drama, no chaos. Just work and quiet and the baby growing steadily inside her. She was almost starting to relax when Saturday night everything changed. She was making dinner, pasta, something simple, when she heard shouting from the direction of the main house. Men's voices, angry, rapid Italian, too fast for her to follow clearly. Then silence. Madeline set down the spoon she'd been using and moved to the window. She could see lights on in the main house, shadows moving behind curtains. Nothing that looked immediately dangerous. She told herself it was none of her business. Alessandro's personal affairs had nothing to do with her. But 15 minutes later, when a black SUV roared up the driveway and 3 men in suits climbed out and headed into the house with grim expressions, she started to worry. Another hour passed. The SUV left. The lights in the main house went off one by one until only a few remained. Her phone buzzed with the text from Alessandro. Everything is fine. Sleep well. She stared at the message. How did he know she'd been watching? Was someone watching her? Madeline stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the dark grounds, the distant gate, the forest pressing close. For the first time since arriving here, she felt the weight of how isolated this place was. How far from anyone who might help if something went wrong. She thought about her laptop, the sparse search results, the way Alessandro's staff moved with military precision, the expensive security system she'd noticed around the property, the way he'd never quite answered her questions about what he really did. "I'm not most people," he'd said. What did that mean? She went to bed but didn't sleep well, her mind running through possibilities she didn't want to consider. When morning came, she looked out to find the grounds peaceful, snow falling gently, no sign of the previous night's tension. Maybe she was paranoid. Maybe she'd imagined the danger in those angry voices. Maybe this was all perfectly normal and she was being ridiculous. Or maybe she'd just gotten her first real glimpse of who Alessandro Vieri actually was. And she had no idea what to do with that knowledge. Madeline didn't mention the incident to anyone. What would she even say? She'd heard shouting and seen men arrive late at night? That could mean anything. Maybe it was a business emergency. Maybe Alessandro had family drama. Maybe she was looking for problems where none existed because she'd spent 2 years with Marcus learning to expect the worst. But she couldn't shake the feeling. Monday morning, she walked to the main house to drop off some completed translations. Angela answered the door, looking tired in a way Madeline hadn't seen before. "Is Alessandro available?" Madeline asked. "He's in meetings all day. I can take those for you." "Sure," Madeline handed over the folder. "Is everything okay? You look exhausted." Angela's professional mask slipped for just a second. "Long weekend, nothing you need to worry about." Which of course made Madeline worry more. She went back to the guest house and tried to focus on work, but her attention kept drifting to the main house, watching for signs of whatever was going on. She saw Alessandro once that afternoon, climbing into one of the SUVs with 2 men she didn't recognize. He looked tense, his jaw tight, his movements sharp with barely controlled anger. The SUV disappeared down the driveway and didn't return. By evening, Madeline had convinced herself she was being ridiculous. She made dinner, took a shower, settled on the couch with her laptop to watch a movie. Normal things. Everything was fine. The knock at her door came just after 9. She jumped, startled. Nobody knocked this late. Through the window, she could see Alessandro standing on her porch, still in his suit from earlier, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Madeline opened the door. "Is something wrong?" "Can I come in?" She stepped aside and he walked past her, bringing cold air and tension with him. He stood in the middle of her small living room, looking somehow out of place despite owning the building. "I owe you an explanation," he said without preamble. "For what?" "Saturday night. You saw the cars, heard the shouting, probably. I saw your lights on late." So he had been watching. Madeline crossed her arms. "You said everything was fine, like I lied." He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that made him look younger and more human. "Or rather, I simplified. Things are complicated right now." "Complicated how?" Alessandro turned to face her fully, and she saw the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of what to tell her and what to hold back. "My business has aspects I haven't discussed with you. Legal aspects, but not necessarily—" He paused, searching for words. "Not necessarily conventional." Madeline's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means the import-export work I do involves certain clients in certain markets that operate outside standard channels. It means I have competitors who sometimes use aggressive tactics. And it means Saturday night, one of those competitors made a move I didn't anticipate." She should walk away, should tell him to leave, should pack her pathetic garbage bags and call a cab and get as far from here as possible. Instead, she heard herself ask, "What kind of move?" "One of my shipments was intercepted. $30,000 worth of merchandise gone, along with the driver who was supposed to deliver it. My people are handling it, but the situation is delicate." "Is your driver okay?" Something flickered across Alessandro's face that might have been surprise. "That's your first question? You said he was gone. I want to know if he's hurt." "He's alive, shaken, but unharmed. They just wanted the shipment." "They," Madeline repeated. "Your competitors." "Yes." She sat down on the couch, her legs suddenly unsteady. "What kind of merchandise are we talking about?" "Does it matter?" "Yes. It matters a lot, actually. Alessandro studied her for a long moment. Then he crossed to the couch and sat on the opposite end, maintaining distance but close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Wine, he said. High-end Italian wines that are difficult to import through normal channels due to tariffs and regulations. I have connections in Italy who can source bottles that collectors here will pay premium prices for. It's technically illegal to avoid the import taxes, but it's not... He paused. It's not drugs or weapons or anything that harms people. It's just wine. Madeline wanted to laugh at the absurdity. She'd been imagining mob connections and criminal empires, and it was wine smuggling? That's it? That's your big illegal business? Among other things, but yes, primarily I facilitate the movement of luxury goods through unofficial channels. Art, wine, certain antiques, items that wealthy people want and are willing to pay for without asking too many questions about provenance. So you're like a high-class fence. That's one way to put it. He almost smiled. I prefer to think of myself as providing a service that connects sellers with buyers while avoiding unnecessary bureaucratic obstacles. And these competitors of yours, they're in the same business? More or less, there's only so much market to go around. Occasionally people get territorial about it. Madeline processed this, trying to reconcile the man sitting on her couch with the criminal activity he was describing. It should have scared her more than it did. Maybe she was still in shock. Maybe pregnancy hormones were affecting her judgment. Why are you telling me this? She asked finally. Because you deserve to know what you've gotten yourself into. Because I don't want you to wake up one day and realize you're working for someone you can't trust. He met her eyes. And because if you want to leave, I'll help you. No questions asked, no obligations. I'll make sure you have money and resources to start somewhere else. But I needed you to have the full picture first, so I can make an informed decision. Yes, she should leave. Any rational person would leave. But Madeline found herself thinking about Marcus, about the apartment she couldn't go back to, about the baby growing inside her, and the complete lack of options she had. Alessandro was offering her a choice, which was more than anyone else had given her in a long time. The translations I've been doing, she said slowly, are they actually for legitimate business? Yes. I keep that side of things completely separate. The shipping company is real, the clients are real. I wouldn't involve you in anything questionable without your knowledge. But you have involved me, by bringing me here, by employing me. If something happened, if you got caught, you'd be protected. You have documentation showing you're a translator working on standard business correspondence. Nothing ties you to the other aspects of what I do. Except living on your property, except you saving my life. Alessandro leaned back, looking at the ceiling. I know how this looks. I know what you must be thinking. But I meant what I said before. I found you dying, and I had the means to help. Everything else is separate. Is it, though? You said you needed a translator. Maybe you needed someone who'd be grateful enough not to ask questions. If that's what I wanted, I would have hired someone through normal channels and kept my distance. I brought you into my home because... He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. Because you reminded me that not everyone in this world is operating an angle. You were just someone in trouble who needed help. And now I'm someone who knows your secrets. Yes, he didn't deny it. Which is why I'm giving you the choice. Stay or go. No pressure either way. Madeline looked around the guest house, at the comfortable furniture and the stocked kitchen and the quiet safety of it all. Then she thought about going back to nothing, to Marcus's contempt and missed deadlines and scrambling for enough money to survive. What happens if I stay? She asked. You keep working as my translator. You live here as long as you need to. We maintain professional boundaries. He paused. And occasionally you might hear or see things related to my other business. I won't hide it from you anymore, but I also won't involve you directly. You'll know enough to make informed decisions, but not so much that you're implicated. That sounds like a terrible idea. Probably. Alessandro smiled slightly. But most of the good decisions I've made started out looking terrible. She should ask more questions, should demand details about exactly what he was involved in, who these competitors were, what the risks really looked like. But she was tired of questions that didn't have good answers. I need to think about it, Madeline said. Of course. Take all the time you need. He stood, heading for the door. For what it's worth, I hope you stay. You're good at the work, and Angela likes having you around, but I understand if this is too much. After he left, Madeline sat in the dark for a long time, her hands on her stomach, feeling the baby move. She was 20 weeks now, halfway through. In 4.5 months, she'd have an actual child to take care of, a tiny person who would depend on her for everything. What kind of mother accepted help from a criminal? But what kind of mother let her pride and fear leave her child homeless? She pulled out her laptop and searched for apartments in Billings. The cheapest one-bedroom she could find was $800 a month, and that was in a neighborhood she wouldn't feel safe in. She'd need first and last month's rent, deposits, furniture, baby supplies. Even with her old freelance income, she'd be stretched impossibly thin. Alessandro was offering her $60,000 a year, free housing, and health insurance. With that kind of stability, she could save money, could plan for the future, could give her baby a real chance. All she had to do was ignore the fact that the money came from smuggling wine and art for rich people who didn't want to pay taxes. Was that really so bad? Nobody was getting hurt. Alessandro had said it himself. It wasn't drugs or weapons. It was just helping wealthy collectors avoid bureaucracy. Madeline closed her laptop and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. She kept seeing Alessandro's face when he'd admitted the truth, the way he'd given her the option to leave, the tired honesty in his eyes. He could have kept lying, could have let her believe everything was legitimate. Instead, he'd trusted her with information that could destroy him. Why? The question followed her into restless sleep and was still there when she woke up the next morning. She got dressed, made coffee, stared out the window at the snow-covered grounds. Alessandro's SUV was parked near the main house. He was home, probably waiting to hear her decision. Madeline picked up her phone and called the number Angela had given her for the main house. Yes? Alessandro's voice, professional and guarded. It's me. Can we talk? Of course. Come over whenever you're ready. She walked to the main house through the cold morning air, her breath fogging. Marco let her in and directed her to Alessandro's office, a room she hadn't seen before, all dark wood and leather furniture and walls lined with books. Alessandro sat behind a massive desk, and for a moment she could see him clearly, the man who ran an empire, legal and otherwise, who made decisions that affected people's lives, who inhabited power so completely he didn't need to show it off. I'm staying, Madeline said before she could change her mind. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed. You're sure? No, but I need this job and this house and the insurance, and you're offering all of that. I can't afford to let morality get in the way of survival. That's honest, at least. She moved further into the room, stopping in front of his desk. But I need you to promise me something. What? If things get dangerous, really dangerous, not just competitors stealing shipments, you tell me. You give me enough warning to get out. I won't ask questions, won't demand explanations. Just tell me to leave, and I will. Alessandro stood, coming around the desk to face her. I can promise that. And the translations I do stay legitimate. I won't help with the smuggling, won't translate anything connected to that side of your business. Already handled. I keep those worlds completely separate. Okay. Madeline took a deep breath. Then I'm in, for however long this works. He extended his hand and she shook it, his grip warm and solid. Thank you for trusting me. I'm not sure I do yet, but I'm willing to try. Fair enough. Alessandro released her hand and returned to his desk. There's actually something I wanted to discuss. One of my clients is coming to visit next week. Legitimate client from the shipping business. He'll be here for dinner Thursday evening. I'd like you to join us. He's from Milan and prefers to conduct business in Italian. You want me to translate during dinner? If necessary. Mostly I just want him to feel comfortable. He's old-fashioned, values personal connection. Having someone who can speak his language fluently will smooth the conversation. Madeline hesitated. I'm not really equipped for fancy dinners. Angela can help with that if you need it, but honestly, just be yourself. He'll appreciate the authenticity. After she left the office, she found Angela in the kitchen and mentioned the dinner. Angela's eyes lit up. Oh, good. Something to plan. We'll make sure you have something appropriate to wear. What size are you now? I have no idea. Everything's getting tight. Angela pulled out a measuring tape and within minutes had Madeline's current dimensions. I'll order a few options. You'll look lovely. I don't need to look lovely. I just need to translate. Mr. Vieri's hosting an important client. Everyone at that table represents him. You'll look lovely. Angela's tone suggested the matter was closed. The week leading up to the dinner passed in a blur of work and preparation. Madeline translated contracts and correspondence, attended a video conference where she provided real-time translation, and proved to herself that she could actually do this job well. Alessandro sent her brief emails of approval after each assignment, professional and distant, back to the boundaries he'd mentioned. The maternity dresses Angela ordered arrived Wednesday. 3 options, all elegant and professional, all way too expensive. Madeline tried them on and chose a deep blue one that made her look less like a pregnant refugee and more like an actual professional. Thursday evening, she walked to the main house feeling like she was about to step onto a stage. Angela had done something subtle with her hair and makeup, enough to make her feel put together without looking like she'd tried too hard. The dining room was set beautifully, candles and wine glasses and china that probably cost more per plate than Madeline spent on groceries in a month. Alessandro stood near the window in a tailored suit, looking every inch the successful businessman. When he saw her, something flickered in his eyes. "You look professional," he said. "That's the goal, right?" "Exactly the goal." He glanced at his watch. "Giovanni should be here any moment. He's going to love you. I'm here to translate, not to be loved." "You can do both." The doorbell rang before she could respond. Alessandro went to answer it himself, returning moments later with a man in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing a suit that screamed Italian tailoring. "Giovanni, this is Madeline Carter, my translator," Alessandro said in English. Then, switching to Italian, he added, "She's fluent and has been handling all my Italian correspondence." Giovanni's face brightened. He took Madeline's hand and kissed it in the old-fashioned way. "Che piacere," he said. "What a pleasure. Finally, someone who can understand me properly." Alessandro's Italian is good, but he has the accent of a tourist. Madeline laughed, responding in Italian. "I'll try not to embarrass him too much by comparison." The dinner went smoother than she'd expected. Giovanni was charming and funny, telling stories about his shipping business and the chaos of working with American customs officials. Alessandro mostly listened, asking occasional questions, letting Madeline handle the linguistic heavy lifting when Giovanni's English faltered or when he wanted to express something complex. But she noticed how carefully Alessandro controlled the conversation, steering away from certain topics, keeping Giovanni focused on safe subjects. And she noticed the way Giovanni would sometimes glance at her and then at Alessandro, a knowing look in his eyes that suggested he was reading something into the situation that wasn't there. "You're very fortunate," Giovanni said to Alessandro in Italian during dessert, "to have found someone so talented who also understands discretion." Madeline translated automatically before realizing he'd meant for her to hear it. Alessandro's eyes cut to her briefly before responding. "I am fortunate. Madeline is an excellent addition to the team." "And she lives here? On the property?" "In the guest house, yes. It makes the work more efficient." Giovanni smiled into his wine. "Of course, very efficient." After he left, Madeline helped Angela clear the table despite protests that she should rest. "You did wonderfully," Angela said. Giovanni was impressed. "He thought Alessandro and I were together, I could tell." "Well, you do live on his property and you're having a baby. People make assumptions." Madeline stopped, a stack of plates in her hands. "Did you assume that?" Angela met her eyes. "No. I know Mr. Vieri better than that, but I understand why others might." Alessandro appeared in the doorway. "Madeline, can I speak with you for a moment?" She followed him back to his office, nervous about what was coming. He poured himself a whiskey and offered her one before remembering she was pregnant. "Water?" he offered instead. "I'm fine. What did you want to talk about?" He leaned against his desk. "Giovanni is going to tell people we're involved. That's how his mind works. Young woman living on a man's property, there must be something going on. I can't control what he thinks, but I can control how we handle it." "Okay. If it bothers you, I'll make it clear to anyone who asks that you're an employee, nothing more. But honestly, the assumption might work in our favor. People are less likely to question your presence here if they think there's a personal relationship." Madeline felt her face heat. "You want people to think we're together?" I want people to think whatever keeps them from asking uncomfortable questions about why I'm employing a pregnant woman I found in a snowbank. If that means they assume romance, so be it. That doesn't bother you? Why would it? I know the truth. You know the truth. What strangers think is irrelevant. He paused. Unless it bothers you. I just don't want people thinking I'm... She struggled for the right words. That I'm using the baby to trap you or something. Alessandro's expression softened. Anyone who knows me knows I don't get trapped. And anyone who matters will see how hard you work and how professional you are. The rest don't deserve our concern. She wanted to argue but couldn't find solid ground. He was right. What did it matter what strangers thought? She was here to work and keep her baby safe. Everything else was noise. Fine, she said. Let them think whatever they want. Good. He set down his glass. You did excellent work tonight. Giovanni was genuinely impressed, and he's not easy to impress. Thank you. I'm increasing your salary to $70,000. You've proven yourself worth it. Madeline blinked. That's not necessary. It's exactly necessary. You're doing the work of a senior translator, and I pay people what they're worth. He pulled an envelope from his desk drawer. Here's your first month's pay, including the raise. She took the envelope with shaking hands. More money than she'd made in 3 months of freelance work. This was real. This job, this life, it was actually real. Thank you, she said quietly. You've earned it. Walking back to the guest house that night, Madeline felt something shift inside her. For the first time since Marcus threw her out, she felt like maybe she wasn't just surviving. Maybe she was actually building something. It was built on shaky ground, sure, on a foundation of smuggled wine and a criminal employer, but it was hers. She opened the envelope once she was inside and counted the money. $7,000. She sat on her couch and just stared at it, feeling tears prick her eyes. She had money, she had housing, she had health care, she had a job she was good at, she had a chance. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Madeline worked on translations, attended occasional dinners with clients, and slowly transformed the guest house into something that felt like home. She bought curtains and plants, put up a few pictures, made the second bedroom into a nursery, even though the baby wouldn't arrive for months. Angela fussed over her constantly, making sure she ate properly and took her vitamins. Marco started leaving firewood stacked by her door without being asked. Even the security guards who patrolled the grounds at night learned her name and would nod when they passed. She was becoming part of the fabric of this place, and it terrified her as much as it comforted her. Alessandro remained professional and distant, except for occasional evening conversations when he'd stop by the guest house to discuss work or bring her new assignments. They developed an easy rapport, talking about translation challenges and difficult clients and the absurdity of international shipping regulations. He never mentioned the other side of his business again. But Madeline saw the signs. Late-night meetings, the SUVs coming and going, the tension that would grip the house for a day or two before releasing. She didn't ask questions. She kept her head down and did her work and tried not to think about what was happening in the shadows around her. Until the night she heard the gunshot. It was just after midnight. Madeline was in bed, half asleep, when the sharp crack brought her fully awake. She sat up, heart pounding, listening. Silence. Then shouting, multiple voices, too far away to make out words. She grabbed her phone and was about to call 911 when it buzzed with a text from Alessandro. Stay inside, lock your doors, everything is under control. She locked the doors with shaking hands and moved away from the windows, crouching in the hallway where she couldn't be seen. The baby kicked frantically, sensing her fear. She put a hand on her stomach and tried to breathe slowly. More shouting, the sound of car doors slamming, an engine starting and speeding away. Then nothing. Madeline waited in the hallway for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. Finally, her phone rang. Alessandro. Are you all right? His voice was rough. Yes. What happened? We had an intruder. He's gone now. You're safe. Was anyone hurt? A pause. No. The shot was a warning. He ran. Alessandro. I'm coming over. He arrived 5 minutes later, still wearing what he'd had on earlier, but disheveled now, his shirt untucked, his expression harder than she'd ever seen it. He walked through the guest house, checking windows and doors, while Madeline stood in the kitchen trying to process what had just happened. This is because of the wine shipment, she said when he came back. The one that got stolen. They're escalating. Yes. He didn't try to deny it. You said it wasn't dangerous. I said it wasn't drugs or weapons. I never said it wasn't dangerous. Alessandro leaned against the counter, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. I'm sorry. I should have been more clear about the risks. Is this going to happen again? I'm handling it. I've been handling it. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. He met her eyes. I need to know if you want out, if this is too much, because it's only going to get more complicated before it gets simpler. Madeline thought about the money in her bank account, the nursery she'd been putting together, the stability she'd built over the past month. Thought about walking away from all of it and going back to nothing. I need protection, she said. If people are showing up with guns, I need to know I'm safe. You have it. I'm upgrading security tomorrow. Motion sensors, cameras, armed guards. No one gets near this property without us knowing. And if they get through anyway? Alessandro's expression went cold. Then they deal with me. The way he said it made her believe him. This was a man who'd built an empire in the shadows, who moved illegal goods across international borders, who had competitors afraid enough to come armed. This was not someone to underestimate. Okay, Madeline said, but if this keeps happening, if it gets worse, you keep your promise. You tell me to leave. I will. He left soon after, and Madeline tried to go back to sleep but couldn't. She lay in bed watching the shadows on the ceiling, listening to every small sound, jumping at nothing. She'd known from the beginning that Alessandro was involved in something questionable. She'd accepted it because she was desperate and because it seemed victimless. But tonight had proven how naive that was. This world had violence in it, had people angry enough to show up with weapons, and she was living right in the middle of it, carrying a baby who depended on her to make smart choices. The smart choice would be to leave. But Madeline stayed. The security upgrade started the next morning. Madeline woke to the sound of trucks rumbling up the driveway and men shouting instructions to each other. By noon, workers were installing cameras on every corner of the guest house, mounting motion sensors along the perimeter, reinforcing the locks on her doors and windows. Angela brought her lunch and stayed to chat, though Madeline suspected she'd been sent to keep her calm. It's just a precaution, Angela said, setting down a plate of sandwiches. Mr. Vieri takes security very seriously. Because of last night, Angela's expression flickered. You heard about that? I was awake when it happened. I heard the gunshot. Nothing to worry about. The person who shouldn't have been here is gone, and now we're making sure it doesn't happen again. Angela poured tea like they were discussing the weather. How are you feeling? Any contractions or cramping? The abrupt subject change was obvious, but Madeline let it go. No, I'm fine. The baby's moving a lot today, actually. Good. That's good. Angela squeezed her hand. You're safe here, Madeline. I promise you that. Madeline wanted to believe her. After Angela left, she watched the security team work, feeling increasingly like she was living in a fortress, which maybe she was. Alessandro had built walls around his empire, and now she was inside them. She tried to focus on work but couldn't concentrate. The translations blurred together, her mind wandering to the gunshot, the intruder, the casual way Alessandro had said he was handling it. What did that mean? What did handling it look like in a world where people showed up armed in the middle of the night? That evening, Alessandro knocked on her door. He looked less exhausted than the night before, but there was still tension in his shoulders. Can I come in? Madeline stepped aside. He walked to her windows, checking the newly installed sensors with a critical eye. These are good. Military grade. They'll alert the main house if anyone comes within 50 feet of this building. He turned to face her. You'll also have a panic button installed tomorrow. Press it, and armed security will be here in under 2 minutes. Do you really think that's necessary? I think I'd rather be overcautious than have something happen to you. His voice was flat, factual. The situation with my competitor is escalating. Last night was a message. I sent one back today. Madeline sat down slowly. What kind of message? The kind that makes it clear there will be consequences for coming onto my property uninvited. He moved away from the window. I don't want you to be afraid, but I do want you to be aware. For the next few weeks, stay close to the house. Don't go anywhere alone. If you need something from town, Marco or one of the other men will drive you. I can't live like a prisoner. You're not a prisoner. You're someone I'm protecting. Because of your business dealings that have nothing to do with me. Alessandro's jaw tightened. You're on my property, under my employment. That makes you my responsibility. If something happened to you because of my choices, I wouldn't forgive myself. The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the controlled businessman she'd gotten used to. This was something more vulnerable underneath. I'm not your responsibility, Madeline said quietly. I made the choice to stay. That's on me. You made that choice before someone fired a warning shot 50 yards from where you sleep. The situation has changed. So what do you want me to do? Pack up and leave? No. The word came out harsh. He softened his tone. No, I don't want you to leave. I want you to let me keep you safe until this is resolved. And how long will that take? I don't know. Weeks, maybe. A month at most. Madeline rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. She was 6 months pregnant, living on a criminal's estate, surrounded by armed guards because his competitor had escalated a dispute over stolen wine. This was insane. Her entire situation was insane. Tell me about him, she said. Your competitor, who is he? Alessandro hesitated, then sat down in the chair across from her. His name is Viktor Kozlov, Russian, based in Seattle but with connections throughout the Northwest. He runs a similar operation to mine, but with less discretion and more violence. We've had territorial disputes before, but this is the first time he's brought it to my home. Why now? What changed? I took a contract he wanted. A client in New York looking to acquire a specific collection of Soviet-era art. Victor had been courting this client for months, but I had better connections in Moscow and closed the deal first. He didn't take it well. So he stole your wine shipment, and I reclaimed it, plus some of his inventory as compensation, which prompted last night's visit. This is about pride, Madeline said. Two men playing power games over who controls what territory. It's about business. Territory is just the playing field. People could get hurt over this. Your driver almost did. My driver is fine and being well compensated for his trouble, and no one will get hurt if Victor accepts that he can't push me around on my own property. And if he doesn't accept that? Alessandro's expression went cold. Then I'll make him accept it. The implicit threat hung in the air between them. Madeline wanted to press for details, wanted to know exactly what Alessandro meant by making someone accept something, but part of her didn't want the answer. Plausible deniability, she thought. If she didn't ask, she didn't have to know. I need air, she said, standing up. I've been inside all day watching people install security equipment, and I need to walk. Take Marco with you. I'm walking to the main house to get dinner from Angela, not hiking into the wilderness. Madeline? I'll stay inside of the windows. I'll be fine. She walked out before he could argue further, needing distance from the conversation and from the weight of Alessandro's protective intensity. The cold air bit at her face as she crossed the short distance between buildings. Through the windows, she could see Angela moving around the kitchen, and the sight of something normal and domestic made her chest tight. Marco appeared beside her before she'd made it halfway. Mister, Vieri asked me to accompany you, he said in his quiet way. Madeline sighed. Of course he did. He worries. He needs to stop. I can walk 50 yards without armed escort. Probably. Marco's tone suggested he wasn't going to argue, but also wasn't going to leave. But this way he sleeps tonight instead of watching the security feeds. That image, Alessandro staring at camera monitors, watching for threats, shouldn't have affected her. But it did. She thought about him sitting in his office last night, disheveled and exhausted, checking her doors and windows personally, taking responsibility for her safety like it was his sacred duty. She barely knew him. They had a professional relationship, nothing more. So why did the idea of him losing sleep over her make something warm curl in her chest? Fine, she said to Marco. You can walk me to dinner. Angela had prepared enough food for a small army, which seemed to be her standard operating procedure. Madeline ate in the kitchen while Angela fussed and Marco stood by the door, silent and watchful. You're worrying Mr. Vieri, Angela said, serving seconds that Madeline hadn't asked for. I'm not trying to. I know, but he's very protective of the people under his care. It's in his nature. I'm an employee, not a dependent. Angela gave her a look that suggested she was being willfully naive. You're a pregnant woman living alone on his property during a territorial dispute with a violent competitor. Whether you like it or not, you're someone he feels responsible for. That's not fair to him. Life rarely is. Angela sat down across from her with her own cup of tea. Mr. Vieri's father died when he was young. Did he tell you that? Madeline shook her head. He was 14. His father's business partners turned on the family, tried to take everything. Alessandro's mother fought them in court for years, but the stress killed her eventually. Alessandro inherited nothing but debts and enemies. Angela's voice was soft. He built everything you see here from scratch. Every alliance, every business deal, every dollar. And he protects it fiercely because he knows what it's like to lose everything. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand. When he says you're under his protection, it's not a business arrangement, it's personal. He doesn't take responsibility lightly. Madeline absorbed this, trying to reconcile the image of a 14-year-old boy losing everything with the controlled, powerful man she knew. It explained things, the walls he kept up, the careful way he controlled every situation, the intensity with which he'd responded to Victor's intrusion. I don't want to be another thing he has to protect, she said quietly. Too late. You already are. Angela's smile was gentle. But it's not a burden to him. I think you being here reminds him that not everything is about business and territory and winning. Sometimes people just need help. After dinner, Madeline walked back to the guest house with Marco trailing behind. The security lights had been upgraded too, she noticed. The whole property was lit up like a prison yard. Alessandro was waiting on her porch. You shouldn't be outside this late, he said. Neither should you. He ignored that. I wanted to apologize. I was too harsh earlier. You have every right to make your own choices about how much risk you're willing to accept. But you're going to keep the security anyway. Yes, because my choices put you in danger, and I can't undo that. The least I can do is mitigate it. Madeline studied his face in the harsh security lighting. He looked tired, the kind of tired that came from carrying too much weight for too long. Angela's words echoed in her head. He protects things fiercely because he knows what it's like to lose everything. Your driver, she said, the one who got caught in the wine shipment theft. You said he was fine. Did you go check on him yourself? Alessandro blinked, surprised by the question. Yes. Why? Because that's not what most bosses would do. Most bosses would send someone else, keep their distance. He works for me. His safety is my concern. See, that's what I mean. You take everything so personally. Every employee, every responsibility, every threat. Don't you ever get exhausted? Constantly. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But the alternative is letting things fall apart, and I've already lived through that once. She understood then, really understood. This wasn't about power or money or winning against Victor. This was about control. About never being the helpless 14-year-old watching his world collapse again. Angela told me about your parents, Madeline said. Alessandro's expression shuddered. She talks too much. She cares about you. She wanted me to understand why you're being so intense about all this. And do you? Understand? I think so. Madeline wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. I think you're terrified of failing people who depend on you. I think that's why you're upgrading security and having Marco follow me around and personally checking on injured drivers. Because if something happened to any of us, you'd see it as your failure. Is that such a terrible way to be? No, but it's a heavy way to live. Alessandro was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face like he was trying to figure out how she'd seen through him so clearly. You should go inside, he said finally. It's cold. So should you. In a minute. Madeline went inside but watched through the window as Alessandro stood on her porch for a long time, hands in his pockets, staring out at the dark forest beyond the fence, carrying the weight of his empire alone. The next 2 weeks passed in tense quiet. The security team finished their work and disappeared, leaving behind a fortress that felt both safer and more suffocating. Madeline settled into a routine of work and confinement, translating contracts and correspondence while trying not to feel like she was under house arrest. Victor made no more direct moves, but Alessandro was increasingly absent, gone for long stretches to meetings he didn't explain. The tension in the main house was palpable whenever Madeline visited. Angela was distracted. Marco and the other security staff moved with military precision, and even the usually cheerful Maria seemed subdued. Something was building. Madeline could feel it. She was working late on a Thursday night, translating a complex shipping contract when her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Madeline Carter? A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. Yes? This is Rebecca Chen from Billings General Hospital. We have a patient here who listed you as an emergency contact, Marcus Webb. Madeline's stomach dropped. What happened? He was brought in 2 hours ago after a car accident. He's stable, but he's been asking for you. Are you able to come? Madeline's mind raced. Marcus. The man who'd thrown her out, called her a liar, refused to acknowledge their child. Why would he list her as emergency contact? Is he going to be okay? He has a concussion and some broken ribs, but yes, he'll recover. However, he's quite insistent about seeing you. I'm 2 hours away. I can't just... I understand. I'll let him know you were contacted. Thank you for your time. The line went dead. Madeline sat staring at her phone, feeling sick. Marcus was hurt badly enough to be hospitalized. And despite everything he'd done to her, part of her still felt the pull to go to him. She was still sitting there when Alessandro knocked and let himself in without waiting for an answer. Something's wrong, he said immediately. What happened? How did you... The security system flagged an unknown caller. Who was it? The fact that her phone calls were being monitored should have bothered her more than it did. A hospital in Billings. Marcus was in a car accident. He's asking for me. Alessandro's expression went carefully blank. The father of your child. Yes. Are you going? I don't know. I don't even know why he'd want to see me after how we ended things. Madeline stood up, pacing. He threw me out. Told me the baby wasn't his. Why would he list me as emergency contact? Maybe he never changed it after you split. Maybe? She pressed her hands to her temples. I shouldn't care. After what he did, I should just delete the message and move on. But you do care. I spent 2 years with him. I thought we were building a life together. You don't just turn that off because it ended badly. Alessandro moved to the window, his back to her. If you want to go, I'll have Marco drive you. It's not safe for you to make that trip alone. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. He turned to face her. But I need you to think carefully about what going there means. This man hurt you badly enough that you drove into a blizzard to get away from him. Are you prepared to face him again? Madeline sank back onto the couch. I don't know what I'm prepared for anymore. A month ago, I was homeless and pregnant with nowhere to go. Now I'm living in a guest house on a smuggler's estate during a territorial war, and my ex-boyfriend, who denied our child, is in the hospital asking for me. Nothing about my life makes sense. Welcome to the human condition. Alessandro's voice held dark humor. Nothing ever makes sense. We just pretend it does to stay sane. Despite everything, Madeline laughed. It came out slightly hysterical, but it was real. You're not helping. I'm not trying to help. I'm trying to give you permission to be honest about what you want. He sat down in his usual chair. Do you want to see him? Part of me does. The part that remembers when things were good, before he became controlling and mean, before he threw me away like I was nothing. And the other part? Wants to let him suffer alone like he made me suffer. She looked at Alessandro. That makes me a terrible person, doesn't it? It makes you human. Anger is normal after betrayal. Is that why you're so angry at Victor? Because he betrayed some code you both should have followed? Alessandro smiled slightly. Victor and I were never friends. But yes, there are rules in this world, unwritten ones. He broke them by coming to my home. That's not something I can let stand. Even if it means more violence. Sometimes violence is the only language certain people understand. Madeline thought about that, about the world Alessandro inhabited where problems were solved with force and intimidation, where men like Victor existed who'd fire warning shots in the night. It should have repelled her. Instead, she found herself thinking that at least Alessandro's rules were clear. Marcus had pretended to love her while slowly isolating her from everyone else in her life. Alessandro had been honest from the beginning about who he was. I'm not going, she said finally. To see Marcus. Whatever he wants to say to me, he had his chance 2 months ago. I'm done giving him opportunities to hurt me. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She pulled out her phone and blocked the hospital's number. He made his choice when he threw me out. I'm making mine now. Alessandro nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think that takes more courage than going would have. Or maybe I'm just too tired to care anymore. Maybe. But you're still here, still working, still fighting for your future. That's not nothing. After he left, Madeline lay in bed thinking about Marcus in that hospital bed, asking for her, probably confused about why she wasn't coming. She felt guilty for maybe 30 seconds before remembering the look on his face when he'd called her a liar, the way he'd packed her things in garbage bags, the cold satisfaction in his voice when he told her to be gone by midnight. He'd made his bed. She didn't know him comfort now that he was lying in it. The next morning, Angela mentioned that Alessandro had left before dawn for Seattle. Business meeting? Angela said vaguely. He'll be back tomorrow. Madeline knew better. Seattle was where Victor was based. Alessandro hadn't gone for a business meeting. He'd gone to send another message, probably a more forceful one than the last. She tried not to worry, tried to focus on her translations and the nursery she was still putting together. But as the day wore on and Alessandro didn't call or text, the worry grew. What if Victor hurt him? What if this escalated into real violence and Alessandro didn't come back? The thought made her feel sick. Somewhere along the way, without meaning to, she'd started to care about him. Not just as an employer or benefactor, but as a person. Someone who'd shown her more kindness and respect in 2 months than Marcus had in 2 years. By evening, she was checking her phone obsessively. Finally, just after 9, a text came through. Handled. Be home late tomorrow. Don't worry. Don't worry, like that was possible when he was off confronting violent criminals in their own territory. Madeline paced the guest house, too anxious to sit still. The baby was kicking more than usual, picking up on her stress. She put a hand on her stomach and tried to calm down. Your mom is being irrational, she told the baby. Getting worked up over a man who's basically a stranger. We barely know him. But that wasn't quite true anymore. She knew the way Alessandro took his coffee. Knew he worked until 3 in the morning when he was stressed. Knew he personally checked on his injured employees and upgraded security to keep pregnant translators safe, and carried the weight of his empire like it was the only thing standing between him and falling apart. She knew enough to care. That was the problem. The next day dragged. Madeline worked on translations with half her attention, the other half listening for the sound of Alessandro's SUV coming up the driveway. Angela brought lunch and stayed to chat, clearly trying to distract her, but it didn't help. Finally, just before sunset, she heard the engine. She forced herself to stay inside, to not run to the window like some worried wife waiting for her husband to return from war. But she watched through the curtains as Alessandro climbed out of the SUV, moving stiffly like he was hurt. She was out the door before she could stop herself. Are you okay? Alessandro looked surprised to see her. I'm fine, just tired. You're moving like you're in pain. Bruised ribs, nothing serious. Madeline crossed the distance between them and saw the bruise darkening his jaw, the split in his lip that hadn't been there 2 days ago. You got in a fight. A disagreement that got physical. It happens. Did you win? A smile flickered across his battered face. I'm here. Victor's in the hospital getting his nose reset. You tell me. You broke his nose? Among other things, Alessandro's voice was cold. He understands now that my home is off limits. We've reached an agreement about territory and operations. It won't be an issue again. Madeline wanted to ask for details, but didn't. She could see the violence in Alessandro's eyes, the barely contained fury that had driven him to Seattle to physically confront a man who'd threatened his domain. This was the part of him that scared her, the part that solved problems with his fists, that inhabited a world where broken noses were negotiating tactics. But he'd done it to protect his people, to protect her. Come inside, she said. Let me at least clean up your face. Madeline, you took a beating to end this territorial dispute. The least I can do is help you not look like you lost a bar fight. He followed her into the guest house, sinking onto the couch with a barely suppressed wince. Madeline got the first aid kit Angela had insisted she keep, stocked and sat beside him. This might sting, she said, dabbing at the split in his lip with antiseptic. Alessandro didn't flinch. "I've had worse. That's not comforting." She worked in silence, cleaning the cuts on his face, noting the bruises forming on his knuckles. He'd given as good as he got, probably better. The thought should have disturbed her more than it did. "Thank you," Alessandro said quietly when she finished, "for caring enough to patch me up. You protect the people under your care. Apparently I do too." Their eyes met and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. They were both trying to survive in their own ways, both carrying damage from their pasts, both building something fragile and real out of the wreckage. "The situation with Victor is settled," Alessandro said. "You're safe here now. No more incidents, no more threats. You have my word." "How can you be sure?" "Because Victor knows that if he breaks our agreement, I'll destroy him. Not just his business, everything, his reputation, his connections, his life. And he believes I'm capable of it because I proved it today." The ruthlessness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, Madeline felt safer than she had in weeks. This was a man who kept his promises, who followed through on his threats, who protected what was his with absolute conviction. And somehow, despite never agreeing to it, she'd become his to protect. "Get some rest," she said softly. "You look like you're about to pass out." "I should get back to the main house." "You should stay here where someone can make sure you don't have a concussion." Alessandro raised an eyebrow. "Is that your medical opinion?" "That's my opinion as someone who knows you'll work through the night if you go back to your office right now." She stood up. "I have a guest room. Use it. Sleep. Heal. The Empire will survive one night without you hovering over it." He looked like he might argue, but exhaustion won. "All right. One night." She showed him to the guest room and left him there, hearing him collapse onto the bed without bothering to undress. For a long moment she stood in the hallway thinking about the man sleeping 20 feet away, the criminal who'd saved her life, the protector who'd taken a beating to keep her safe, the stranger who somehow didn't feel like a stranger anymore. This was dangerous, she knew, letting herself care about Alessandro, letting herself feel safe in his world, letting down the walls she'd built after Marcus destroyed her trust. She was setting herself up for another kind of hurt. But as she went to bed that night, listening to Alessandro's quiet breathing through the wall, Madeline realized she didn't care. For better or worse, she'd chosen this. Chosen him. Chosen to stay in the fortress he'd built even when she knew the foundation was made of violence and illegal deals and all the things she should have run from. She'd stopped running. Whatever came next, she'd face it here. Alessandro was gone by the time Madeline woke up the next morning, the guest room empty and the bed neatly made. A note sat on her kitchen counter in his precise handwriting. "Thank you for last night. Back to work. Don't forget your appointment with Dr. Shaw at 2. She'd completely forgotten about the prenatal checkup Angela had scheduled for her. 7 months pregnant now, the baby getting bigger every day, and she still sometimes felt unprepared for the reality of it. A tiny human depending on her for everything. The thought was terrifying. Dr. Shaw's office was 40 minutes away in a small town Madeline had never heard of. Marco drove her, silent as always, though she caught him checking the rearview mirror more often than necessary, still watching for threats even though Alessandro had supposedly settled things with Victor. The appointment went smoothly. The baby was healthy, growing right on schedule, heartbeat strong. Doctor. Shaw asked the usual questions about her living situation, her support system, whether she had everything she needed. Madeline gave the usual answers, carefully edited. She lived with her employer on his estate. Yes, she had plenty of support. No, the father wasn't involved. "And you're sure about not finding out the sex?" Dr. Shaw asked, not for the first time. "I'm sure. I want to be surprised." What she didn't say was that knowing felt too real, too concrete. As long as the baby was just the baby, she could keep some emotional distance, could prepare herself without getting overwhelmed. Marcus had rejected this child sight unseen. Madeline needed to be ready to love it enough for both parents. On the drive back, Marco's phone rang. He answered in rapid Italian, too quick for Madeline to follow, his tone sharp. When he hung up, his jaw was tight. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Mr. Vieri needs to speak with you when we get back. There's been a situation." Madeline's stomach dropped. "What kind of situation?" He'll explain. The rest of the drive passed in tense silence. When they pulled up to the estate, Alessandro was standing outside the main house talking to two men Madeline didn't recognize. His face was grim, and when he saw the car, he dismissed them immediately and walked over. "How was the appointment?" he asked. "Fine, the baby's healthy. What's going on?" Alessandro glanced at Marco, who took the hint and walked away. "Let's talk inside." He led her into his office and closed the door. Madeline sat down without being asked, already bracing for bad news. "I got a call this morning from an old associate," Alessandro said, leaning against his desk. "Someone I haven't heard from in years. He wanted to warn me that Victor has been making inquiries about you." The words took a moment to register. "About me? Why?" "Because you're living here, because you're visible, because he's looking for leverage he can use against me despite our agreement." Alessandro's voice was controlled, but she could hear the anger underneath. "He knows attacking my business directly will bring consequences, so he's exploring indirect approaches." "You said he understood the rules, that it was settled." "I thought it was. Apparently Victor is more desperate than I realized." Madeline felt cold despite the warmth of the office. "What kind of inquiries?" "He's been asking questions in billings, talking to people who knew you, trying to find information about your past, your vulnerabilities, anything he can exploit." He talked to Marcus. It wasn't a question. She knew it with sudden certainty. Alessandro nodded. 3 days ago. Marcus told him about the pregnancy, about how you left. Victor now knows you're vulnerable, isolated, dependent on my protection. So what does he want? Money? He wants me to back off a shipping route we both operate on, give him exclusive access to certain ports in exchange for leaving my people alone. Alessandro's expression was stone. He's using you as a bargaining chip. The casual way Victor had reduced her to leverage made Madeline's hands shake. She was 7 months pregnant, and someone she'd never met was treating her like a poker chip in a business negotiation. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to make it very clear that touching you or anyone else on this property would be the last mistake he ever makes." Alessandro's voice was cold enough to freeze. "But I need you to be extra careful for a while. No leaving the property without armed escort. No answering calls from numbers you don't recognize. And if anything feels off, anything at all, you tell me immediately." "This is insane. I'm just a translator who happened to crash in the wrong snowbank." You're more than that now. Whether you wanted to be or not, you're part of my world. Which means Victor sees you as useful." Madeline stood up, needing to pace. "Maybe I should leave. Go somewhere else. Somewhere far away where I'm not a liability to you." "No." The word came out sharp. "That's exactly what he wants. He wants me to feel threatened enough to either give him what he's asking for or make a mistake by overreacting. I won't give him the satisfaction of either. So I just sit here and wait to be used as leverage? You sit here and trust me to handle this." Alessandro moved closer, his dark eyes intense. "I know you're scared. I know this isn't what you signed up for, but running now would put you in more danger, not less. At least here I can protect you." "Can you? Really? Because it seems like Victor keeps finding new ways to get at you despite all your security and threats. He's testing boundaries, seeing how far he can push before I break our agreement and come after him directly. But there are lines even he won't cross, and harming a pregnant woman is one of them. It would turn every other operator in this region against him. You're betting my safety on criminal ethics. I'm betting your safety on the fact that Victor is a businessman first. He wants the shipping route, not a war. If I give him a better option, he'll take it." Madeline wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that Alessandro had everything under control like he always seemed to, but fear was making her doubt everything. "I need some air," she said. "Madeline, I'm going to walk to the guest house. That's 20 yards. I think I can manage without an armed escort." She left before he could argue, stepping out into the cold afternoon. The security lights were already on, even though it was barely past 3. Everything about this place screamed fortress now. She'd been naive to think she could just work and save money and pretend the rest didn't matter. Angela intercepted her halfway to the guest house. "I heard," Angela said simply, "about Victor's inquiries. Does everyone know?" "The staff knows to be on alert. We protect our own." Angela fell into step beside her. "You're safe here, Madeline. Mr. Vieri won't let anything happen to you. He can't control everything. No, but he can control more than you think. Angela squeezed her arm. I've worked for him for 8 years. I've seen him handle situations that would have destroyed other men. He doesn't lose. Not when it matters. Back in the guest house, Madeline tried to work but couldn't focus. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow outside the window looked like a threat. By evening, she was exhausted from the adrenaline, her body aching. A knock came at the door just after dark. She checked the security screen Alessandro had installed and saw him standing there with takeout bags. I brought dinner, he said when she opened the door. Figured you wouldn't feel like cooking. I'm not hungry. You need to eat anyway. The baby needs it. She let him in because arguing felt like too much effort. He set the bags on her kitchen counter and started unpacking containers of Thai food. I spoke with Victor this afternoon, Alessandro said, handing her a plate. Made it clear that his inquiries about you stop now or our agreement is void. What did he say? That he was just gathering information, that he had no intention of acting on it. Alessandro's tone suggested he didn't believe that for a second. But he also agreed to back off. He knows he went too far. So it's over? For now, but I'm not taking chances. He pulled out a small device from his pocket and set it on the counter. This is a tracker. Keep it on you at all times. If something happens and I can't reach you by phone, I can find you. Madeline stared at the device. It looked like a simple pendant on a chain, elegant and unobtrusive. You want me to wear a tracker? I want you to have every possible safety measure. This is just one of them. What are the others? Marco is moving into the main house permanently. He'll be on call 24 hours. I've also hired 2 additional security guards specifically for the guest house perimeter. And I'm installing a safe room in your bedroom closet. Reinforced walls, separate phone line, supplies to last 3 days if necessary. The level of preparation should have reassured her. Instead, it made everything feel more real and more frightening. You really think it could come to that? Me hiding in a safe room? I think Victor is unpredictable, and I'd rather over-prepare than lose someone I'm responsible for. I'm not your responsibility. We've had this conversation. You're on my property, under my employment. That makes you my responsibility, whether you accept it or not. Alessandro sat down across from her. But it's more than that now, and you know it. She did know it. Somewhere between him pulling her from the snowbank and sleeping in her guest room after taking a beating to protect his territory, the lines had blurred. They weren't just employer and employee anymore. They were something more complicated, something neither of them had defined. What happens when the baby comes? Madeline asked quietly. When I have a newborn to protect too. How long can I stay here knowing Victor or someone like him might use us to get to you? As long as you need to. I told you before. This is your home until you decide it isn't. That's not realistic. Eventually Victor will escalate again, or someone new will appear, or your business will shift in a way that puts us in danger. I can't raise a child in the middle of a territorial war. Alessandro was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. What if the war ended? What if I shifted my operations to legitimate business only? Madeline stared at him. You'd do that? I've been considering it for a while. The illegal side brings in good money, but it also brings constant headaches. Competitors like Victor, risks of getting caught, always looking over my shoulder. Maybe it's time to leave that behind. But your whole empire is built on it. My empire is built on connections and business sense. I can apply those to legal operations just as easily. It'll take time to transition, but it's possible. He met her eyes. If it means keeping you and your child safe, it's worth considering seriously. She didn't know what to say. Alessandro was talking about fundamentally changing his entire business model because a pregnant translator had stumbled into his life. It was too much, too fast. Don't make that decision because of me, she said. Make it because it's what you want. Maybe what I want has changed. Maybe having someone here who isn't part of that world has made me realize how tired I am of operating in the shadows. Before Madeline could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number. She looked at Alessandro, who nodded for her to answer. Hello? Madeline Carter? A man's voice, accented, Russian. Her blood went cold. Who is this? A friend of your employer. I wanted to introduce myself properly since Alessandro has been so protective of you. My name is Victor Kozlov. Alessandro was on his feet immediately, moving close enough to hear. His face was murderous. I don't know why you're calling me, Madeline said, trying to keep her voice steady. To apologize. Alessandro was quite upset about my inquiries into your background. I meant no disrespect. I was simply curious about the woman who has captured his attention so completely. I'm his translator, nothing more. Of course. Just as I am simply a businessman who occasionally competes with Alessandro for clients. We all play our roles, don't we? Victor's voice was smooth, almost friendly. I called to assure you that you have nothing to fear from me. Despite what Alessandro may have told you, I am not in the habit of harming innocent people. Then why the inquiries? Why the intimidation? Business negotiations, nothing personal. But I can see now that my methods have caused you unnecessary stress. Please accept my apologies. Alessandro grabbed the phone from her hand. Don't ever contact her again, he said in a voice like ice. Not by phone, not through intermediaries, not at all. This is your only warning. He hung up and immediately started making calls. Within minutes, Marco and 2 other men appeared at the guest house. Alessandro gave rapid instructions in Italian while Madeline sat frozen on the couch. Victor had her number, had called her directly. The violation of it made her feel sick. How did he get my number? She asked when Alessandro finally turned back to her. Marcus probably gave it to him, or he bought it from someone who had access to your old phone records. Alessandro crouched in front of her, his hands on her knees. Listen to me. Victor calling you directly violates every boundary we set. He's trying to rattle us both, trying to make me do something rash. I won't give him that satisfaction. What are you going to do? Make him regret breaking our agreement. The cold promise in his voice should have scared her. Instead, Madeline felt a fierce satisfaction. Victor had made this personal by dragging her into it. Let him face the consequences. Marco stayed at the guest house that night, sleeping on the couch despite Madeline's protests that it wasn't necessary. Alessandro left to handle whatever retribution he was planning, his expression grim and determined. Madeline lay in bed staring at the ceiling, one hand on her stomach where the baby was kicking. 7 months along, and instead of preparing a nursery in peace, she was caught in the crossfire of a criminal turf war. This was insane. Everything about this situation was completely insane. But she didn't leave, didn't pack her bags and call a cab and run like every rational part of her brain was screaming for her to do. Because for all the danger and chaos, she felt safer here than she had anywhere else. Alessandro's protection was real. His commitment to keeping her safe was absolute. And somewhere along the way, she'd started trusting that more than she trusted her own judgment. That probably made her an idiot. But it was the truth. The next morning, Alessandro returned looking like he hadn't slept. He dismissed Marco and sat down heavily in Madeline's living room. It's handled, he said without preamble. Victor's operations in 3 key cities are currently being dismantled by federal authorities. Anonymous tips about tax evasion, customs violations, and falsified shipping documents. By the end of the week, he'll be too busy defending himself to worry about us. Madeline absorbed this. You reported him to the authorities. I gave them information they could verify independently. What they do with it is their choice. But you just destroyed his business. I removed his ability to threaten mine. There's a difference. Alessandro leaned back, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. He crossed a line by contacting you directly. I told him there would be consequences. And what about your business? Won't the authorities start looking at you too? My legitimate operations are clean. The other side is insulated enough that there's nothing connecting me directly. Victor wasn't as careful. He made himself vulnerable. So this was always a possibility. You could have destroyed him whenever you wanted. Yes, but I preferred to maintain the balance. Live and let live. Operate in our own territories. Respect boundaries. Victor forced my hand by going after you. Madeline studied his face, seeing the ruthlessness there, but also the exhaustion. You didn't want to do this. No. Despite everything, Victor and I had an understanding. We weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. Now he is an enemy, and that limits my options in the future. But he left me no choice when he brought you into it. So what happens now? Now we wait. Victor will be too busy with federal investigations to cause trouble. His associates will distance themselves to avoid being caught up in it. In 6 months, maybe a year, his operation will be completely dismantled, and someone new will move into that territory. Someone I'll have to negotiate with all over again. Alessandro rubbed his eyes. But you'll be safe. That's what matters. You keep saying that I'm what matters. Because it's true. Why? I'm just someone you found in a snowbank. You don't owe me this level of protection. Alessandro looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. You want honesty? Always. Because you remind me that there's more to life than power and territory and winning. Because having you here has made me question choices I've made for the last 15 years. Because when I think about something happening to you, I feel a fear I haven't felt since I watched my mother die. He stood up abruptly. That's why. Whether that's fair to you or not, that's the truth. He left before she could respond, the door closing quietly behind him. Madeline sat in the silence of her living room, her heart pounding, trying to process what he'd just admitted. He cared about her, not as an employee or a responsibility, but as a person. Someone who mattered to him in a way that went beyond professional boundaries. And the terrifying part was that she felt the same way. The weeks that followed were strange. Victor's operation collapsed exactly as Alessandro had predicted, the federal investigation spreading like wildfire through his network. Alessandro watched it happen with grim satisfaction, checking in with his contacts daily to track the progress. Madeline threw herself into work and preparing for the baby. The nursery was finally coming together. A crib Angela had insisted on buying, a changing table, tiny clothes that seemed impossibly small. Every item made the reality more concrete. In 2 months, she'd be responsible for another human being. The thought still terrified her. Alessandro stopped by most evenings now, usually with some excuse about work, but clearly just checking on her. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm of conversation, talking about everything and nothing while carefully avoiding the feelings neither of them wanted to name. One night he found her struggling to assemble the crib, instructions spread across the floor, tears of frustration in her eyes. Here, he said, taking the screwdriver from her hand. Let me. I should be able to do this myself. You're 8 months pregnant. Give yourself a break. He assembled the crib with efficient precision while Madeline sat on the floor and watched. There was something domestic about the scene that made her chest tight. This was what it could have been like with Marcus if he'd been a different person. This was what preparing for a baby should feel like. Partnership, support, someone else sharing the burden. Thank you, she said when the crib stood complete and sturdy. You're welcome. Alessandro looked around the nursery, taking in the soft colors, the stuffed animals, the tiny diapers stacked neatly. You're going to be a good mother. How do you know? Because you care enough to be scared. The people who should be scared are the ones who think it'll be easy. Madeline pulled herself up using the dresser for support. Can I ask you something personal? Always. Do you ever want this? Kids, family, the whole domestic thing? Alessandro was quiet, considering the question seriously. I used to think I did. Then I built my business and convinced myself it was enough. Now, he paused. Now I'm not sure anymore. Being around you, seeing you prepare for this, it's made me reconsider a lot of things. Like going legitimate. Like everything. He met her eyes. My entire adult life has been about control and power, making sure I never end up helpless like I was when my parents died. But watching you these past months, watching you rebuild your life from nothing with courage, I'm not sure I'd have in your position. It's changed my perspective. I'm not courageous. I'm just desperate. You're both. And you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Alessandro moved closer, his voice soft. You could have given up a dozen times. In that snowbank, when you woke up in a stranger's house, when you learned about my business, when Victor started making threats. You had every reason to quit, but you're still here, still fighting. Maybe I'm just stubborn. Stubbornness is underrated. He smiled and it reached his eyes for the first time in days. I'm glad you stayed, Madeline. Whatever comes next, I'm glad you're here. She wanted to close the distance between them, wanted to cross the invisible line they'd been dancing around for months. But the baby chose that moment to kick hard enough to make her gasp. You okay? Alessandro asked immediately. Yeah, just... She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. Feel that? His eyes widened as the baby kicked again, strong and insistent. That's incredible. That's my life for the past 4 months. This kid never stops moving. Alessandro kept his hand there, feeling the movements, something soft and wondering in his expression. This was the man who'd broken Victor's nose and dismantled a criminal empire, looking at her pregnant belly like it was the most miraculous thing he'd ever witnessed. Have you picked a name? He asked. Not yet. I keep changing my mind. You'll know when you meet her. Her? Or him? I have a feeling it's a girl, though. Madeline laughed. Based on what? Your extensive experience with pregnancy? Based on the fact that she kicks like she already knows how to get what she wants. That's definitely a girl. They stood there in the soft lamplight of the nursery, Alessandro's hand still on her stomach, the baby moving beneath their palms. The moment felt significant in a way Madeline couldn't quite define. Like something was shifting between them, moving towards something neither of them had planned but both of them wanted. The spell broke when Alessandro's phone rang. He checked it and his expression darkened. I have to take this. Business. He left quickly, the warmth of the moment evaporating. Madeline heard him on the phone outside, his voice sharp and commanding. The reminder that no matter how domestic this felt sometimes, Alessandro still lived in a world of threats and negotiations and violence. She placed her hand where his had been and felt the baby kick again. In 2 months, this child would be here, real and demanding and completely dependent on her. And she still had no idea how to navigate raising a baby while living in the shadow of a criminal empire, even one that was supposedly going legitimate. That night, alone in her bed, Madeline made a decision. She pulled out her laptop and started researching apartments in nearby cities, places she could afford with her salary, places with good schools and safe neighborhoods, places far enough from Alessandro's world that her child wouldn't grow up surrounded by armed guards and territorial disputes. She loved what she'd built here, loved the safety and stability, loved the work, loved the strange family she'd found in Angela and Marco, and even Alessandro himself. But love wasn't enough when a child's future was at stake. She needed to start planning her exit before she got in any deeper, before leaving became impossible. The apartment listings blurred through her tears. She was 7 months pregnant and planning to walk away from the only real security she'd known in years, planning to raise her child alone because staying meant accepting a level of risk she couldn't justify. It was the right choice, the smart choice. So why did it feel like her heart was breaking? Madeline kept the apartment listings saved on her laptop for 3 days before Angela found them. She'd left the computer open on the kitchen counter while she went to shower, and when she came back, Angela was standing there staring at the screen, her expression unreadable. "You're planning to leave," Angela said. Not a question. Madeline wrapped her bathrobe tighter, feeling exposed. "I'm just looking at options." "Options for what? You have everything you need here." "I have everything except certainty that my child will be safe. There's a difference." Angela closed the laptop carefully. "Have you told Mr. Vieri?" "There's nothing to tell yet. I'm just researching." "He'll be devastated." "He'll understand. He's the one who said I could leave whenever I wanted." Angela gave her a look that suggested she was being willfully naive. "He said that when he thought you'd never actually do it. Things have changed since then, and you know it." Madeline sat down heavily at the table. "That's exactly why I need to go. Because things have changed. Because somewhere along the way this stopped being just a job and a place to stay, and I can't afford to let it become something more." "Why not?" "Because I'm about to have a baby. Because I can't make decisions based on feelings when there's a child involved. Because Alessandro lives in a world where people like Victor exist. And no matter how many precautions he takes, that danger will always be there." Angela was quiet for a moment, then sat down across from her. "I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. 8 years ago, I was working at a hospital in Seattle. My husband had just died of cancer. I was drowning in medical debt, and I was stealing medication to sell on the side just to keep my house. I got caught. Would have gone to prison if Mr. Vieri hadn't intervened." Madeline stared at her. "Alessandro got you out of it?" "He paid my debts, hired a lawyer who got the charges reduced to probation, and offered me a job here. I asked him why he'd help a stranger, and do you know what he said? He said everyone deserves a second chance at building a life. That just because you've made mistakes doesn't mean you're beyond redemption. I didn't know. Most people don't. He doesn't advertise his generosity because he doesn't do it for recognition. He does it because he understands what it's like to have everything fall apart. Angela leaned forward. You think you're just another obligation to him, another responsibility he's taken on, but you're not. You're the first person in years who's made him want something beyond just survival and success. That doesn't change the fact that his world is dangerous. Life is dangerous. You could move to some apartment in a safe neighborhood and get hit by a car tomorrow. Or your baby could get sick. Or 100 other things could go wrong that have nothing to do with Alessandro's business. You can't eliminate risk. You can only decide who you want facing it with you. Madeline wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Angela was right, and that was the problem. She'd spent so long convincing herself that leaving was the smart choice that she hadn't stopped to consider whether it was what she actually wanted. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. How to let myself care about someone again after Marcus. How to trust that Alessandro won't turn into something different once I'm dependent on him. Alessandro isn't Marcus. He's proven that 100 times over. Angela stood up. But you're right that you need to be sure. Your baby deserves a mother who's committed to the life she's choosing, not one who's constantly planning escape routes. So figure out what you really want, Madeline, then make a choice and stick with it. After Angela left, Madeline sat at the table for a long time, her hands on her stomach, feeling the baby move. Figure out what you really want, like it was that simple. What she wanted was impossible, safety and stability without giving up the connection she'd built with Alessandro. She wanted the security of his protection without the danger that came with it. She wanted to raise her child in peace while still being part of the strange family she'd found here. She wanted everything, and that wasn't how life worked. That evening, Alessandro stopped by with dinner like he'd been doing most nights. He seemed distracted, his mind clearly elsewhere, barely touching his food. Something wrong? Madeline asked. Just business complications. Nothing you need to worry about. Is it Victor? I thought that was handled. It is. This is something else. He set down his fork. One of my shipping clients in Italy is being investigated for fraud. If the authorities dig deep enough, they might find connections to some of my less legitimate operations. I'm working on damage control. Will you be okay? I always am. But he didn't sound convinced. Madeline watched him push food around his plate, seeing the weight he carried. This was his life. Constant problems, constant threats, always one step ahead of disaster. And he'd offered to walk away from it all for her. Alessandro, she said carefully, were you serious about going legitimate? He looked up, surprised by the question. Yes. Why? Because I need to know if that's really something you want or if you're just saying it because you think it's what I need to hear. Alessandro was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. At first, I'll admit, it was more about keeping you here, about removing the obstacles that made you question whether staying was safe. But the more I've thought about it, the more I realize it's something I should have done years ago. Why didn't you? Pride, mostly. I built my empire the way I did because it proved I could survive and thrive despite everything that had been taken from me. Walking away felt like admitting I couldn't handle it. He leaned back. But lately I've been asking myself what I'm actually building toward. What's the end game, just accumulating more money and power until I die? That's not much of a legacy. So what would you want instead? Something real. Something that matters beyond just winning territorial disputes with people like Victor. He met her eyes. Something like the family I lost when my parents died. The honesty in his voice made Madeline's throat tight. You can't build a family just to fill a void. I know. But maybe I can build a life that has room for more than just business and survival. Maybe I can be someone who doesn't have to sleep with a gun under his pillow and enemies at his gate. That's a big change. I'm aware. But I think I'm finally ready for it. He paused. The question is whether you'd be willing to stay long enough to see if I can actually pull it off. There it was. The real question underlying everything. Not whether she was safe here, but whether she was willing to bet her future on Alessandro becoming the man he wanted to be. I don't know, Madeline said honestly. I want to, but I'm scared of making another mistake, of trusting someone who'll let me down when it matters most. I can't promise I won't make mistakes, but I can promise I'll never throw you out in the middle of the night or deny your child. I can promise that whatever happens, you'll always have a place here." Alessandro's voice was steady, certain. "I know that's not enough. I know you need more than just my word after what Marcus did. But it's all I have to offer right now." Before Madeline could respond, her water broke. It happened so suddenly she didn't register it at first. Just warmth spreading down her legs, soaking into the chair. Then the first contraction hit, sharp and undeniable, and she gasped. "Madeline?" Alessandro was on his feet immediately. The baby's coming." His face went pale. "You're only 36 weeks, it's too early." "Tell that to the baby." Another contraction, stronger. "We need to get to the hospital." Alessandro was already on his phone, calling for Marco, his voice sharp and commanding. Within minutes, Madeline was in the SUV with Alessandro beside her, Marco driving like his life depended on getting them there fast. The contractions were coming every 5 minutes now, each one stronger than the last. Madeline gripped Alessandro's hand hard enough to hurt, focusing on breathing through the pain. "You're okay," Alessandro kept saying, though she wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. "You're both going to be okay." The hospital was 40 minutes away. Madeline lost track of time somewhere around minute 20, the contractions blending into one continuous wave of pain. She was vaguely aware of Alessandro on the phone with the hospital, giving them updates, demanding they have everything ready. They pulled up to the emergency entrance, and suddenly there were nurses with a wheelchair lifting her out of the SUV, rushing her inside. Alessandro stayed with her, refusing to let go of her hand even when the nurses tried to separate them. "I'm not leaving her," he said, in a tone that left no room for argument. The delivery room was bright and sterile, and nothing like the peaceful water birth Madeline had imagined during her prenatal classes. The doctor kept saying the baby was in distress, that they needed to work fast, that 4 weeks early wasn't ideal, but they'd handle it. Madeline barely heard any of it through the pain. She just held on to Alessandro's hand and pushed when they told her to push, and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. Then suddenly, there was crying, high-pitched and angry and absolutely beautiful. "It's a girl," the doctor said, holding up a tiny red-faced baby covered in vernix. "Small but healthy. Good lungs on her." They placed the baby on Madeline's chest for just a moment before whisking her away to check vitals. Madeline got a glimpse of dark hair and tiny fists and eyes that couldn't quite focus yet. Her daughter. She had a daughter. "She's perfect," Alessandro said, his voice rough with emotion. "Madeline, she's perfect." Madeline wanted to respond, but exhaustion was pulling her under. The last thing she remembered was Alessandro's hand in hers and the sound of her daughter crying in the background. She woke up in a hospital room with late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure how much time had passed. Then she saw the bassinet beside her bed and remembered everything. The baby was sleeping, swaddled in a hospital blanket, impossibly tiny. 5 pounds 4 ounces, the chart on the bassinet said. Small but healthy, all vitals good. Alessandro was asleep in the chair beside her bed, his hand still holding hers loosely, his face exhausted even in sleep. He'd stayed. Through the whole delivery and whatever had come after, he'd stayed. Madeline carefully extracted her hand and reached for the bassinet. The baby stirred but didn't wake, making small sounds. She lifted her daughter carefully, supporting the tiny head, and held her close. The baby opened her eyes, and they were dark, unfocused, searching, looking for something to anchor to in this bright new world. "Hi," Madeline whispered. "I'm your mom. I know I have no idea what I'm doing, but I promise I'll figure it out." The baby made a small sound that might have been agreement or might have been hunger. Madeline attempted to nurse, fumbling with positions until a nurse came in to help. It took several tries, but eventually the baby latched on and started feeding. Alessandro woke up during this, watching quietly. When the baby finished and fell back asleep, he spoke. "Have you picked a name?" Madeline looked down at the tiny person in her arms. She'd gone through 100 names over the past months, unable to commit to any of them. But now, holding her daughter, one name felt right. Sophia, she said. It means wisdom. I figure she'll need a lot of that to survive having me as a mother. Alessandro smiled. Sophia Carter, it's perfect. Sophia Carter Vieri, actually. The words came out before Madeline had fully thought them through. If that's okay with you. You were there when she came into the world. You've protected us both when you didn't have to. That deserves recognition. Madeline, I'm not asking you to be her father, but I want her to know that there was someone who cared enough to stay, who made sure we both survived. She looked up at him. Is that okay? Alessandro's eyes were suspiciously bright. It's more than okay. It would be an honor. He reached out and Sophia wrapped her tiny hand around his finger, holding on with surprising strength. Alessandro stared at that small hand like it was the most miraculous thing he'd ever seen. She's got a good grip, he said. She's going to be strong. She'll have to be, with me as a mother. You're going to be a great mother. You already are. The nurse came in to check vitals and give Madeline instructions about feeding schedules and warning signs to watch for. Sophia was healthy but small, so they'd need to monitor her weight closely. The pediatrician wanted to keep them both for at least 3 days to make sure everything was stable. Alessandro left reluctantly to make phone calls and handle business, promising to be back within the hour. Madeline used the time to just stare at her daughter, memorizing every tiny feature. The dark hair, the button nose, the way her mouth moved even in sleep like she was dreaming of feeding. This was hers, this tiny person who'd survived everything, the crash, the cold, the stress of the past months, who decided to arrive a month early as if she was impatient to finally meet the world. When Alessandro returned, he brought Angela and Maria with him. Angela immediately started fussing over both Madeline and Sophia while Maria unpacked bags of supplies and food. We're setting up the nursery properly, Angela announced. Everything will be ready when you come home. Home. The word settled something in Madeline's chest. The guest house was home, the estate was home, these people who'd gathered around her hospital bed were family. She'd been so focused on planning her escape that she'd missed the fact that she'd already found what she was looking for. The 3 days in the hospital passed in a blur of feedings and diaper changes and learning how to care for a newborn. Alessandro visited every day, bringing food and handling the hospital staff with the same commanding efficiency he applied to everything else. He held Sophia like she was made of glass, talking to her in Italian, telling her stories about his family that he'd never shared with Madeline. On the 3rd day, the pediatrician cleared them to go home. Alessandro had arranged for a car seat and had Marco bring the SUV around. The drive back to the estate felt surreal. Madeline kept checking the rear-view mirror where Sophia was sleeping, hardly believing this was real. The guest house looked different somehow. The nursery was fully set up now, everything organized and ready. There was a rocking chair by the window that hadn't been there before, a nightlight shaped like stars, a sound machine already playing soft white noise. Angela insisted on the finishing touches, Alessandro said. She's been working on it for days. Madeline settled Sophia in the crib, watching her sleep. The baby looked even tinier in the proper crib, but she seemed content, her face peaceful. Thank you, Madeline said, for everything, for being there, for staying, for all of this. You don't need to thank me. I do. Because you didn't have to do any of it, and you did anyway. She turned to face him. I was planning to leave before Sophia came early. I had apartment listings saved, a whole plan worked out. Alessandro's expression didn't change. I know. Angela told me. You knew and you didn't say anything? What would I have said? That you couldn't leave? That you owed me? You don't owe me anything, Madeline. You never did. He moved closer. I just hoped that eventually you'd realize you didn't want to go. I don't. Want to go, I mean. The admission felt monumental. I want to stay here and raise Sophia where she's safe and surrounded by people who care about her. I want to keep working for you and building something stable. I want... She paused, gathering courage. I want to see if this thing between us could be something real. Alessandro went very still. Are you sure? Because once we cross that line, there's no going back to just employer and employee. I haven't thought of you as just my employer in months. Maybe since the beginning, if I'm honest. Madeline stepped closer. I'm terrified, Alessandro. Terrified of trusting someone again. terrified of making another mistake, terrified of everything. But I'm more scared of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been. I'm terrified too, Alessandro admitted. I haven't let anyone this close in years. I don't know how to be what you need. I'm going to make mistakes. So will I. But maybe we can make them together. He closed the distance between them and kissed her, gentle and careful, like she might break. Madeline kissed him back, pouring months of fear and hope and wanting into it. When they pulled apart, Alessandro rested his forehead against hers. I'm going legitimate, he said, starting tomorrow. I've already been working on it, selling off the problematic assets, cutting ties with questionable partners. It'll take time to fully transition, but I'm done with that life. Don't do it just for me. I'm doing it for all of us. You, Sophia, whatever family we might build. I want to be someone my daughter can be proud to know. He pulled back to look at her. Yes, I said my daughter. If you meant what you said about her name, then I want to be a real father to her. Not just someone who provides security, but someone who's actually present. Madeline felt tears spill over. She'd be lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. Alessandro wiped her tears with his thumb. I was dying in a different kind of cold before you came along. You gave me a reason to want more than just survival. Sophia chose that moment to wake up crying. Madeline laughed through her tears and went to pick up her daughter. Alessandro followed, watching as she settled in the rocking chair to nurse. What happens now? Madeline asked. Now we figure it out as we go. I'll keep dismantling the illegal operations. You'll keep translating and being brilliant at it. We'll raise Sophia together and probably mess up 100 times before we get it right. He sat on the floor beside the rocking chair. And maybe, eventually, when you're ready, we'll make this official. Official? Marriage, partnership, whatever you want to call it. A real commitment. Alessandro looked up at her. But only when you're ready. When you trust that I'm not going anywhere. That could take a while. I'm pretty damaged. So am I. We'll be damaged together. The weeks that followed were chaos in the best possible way. Sophia slept in 3-hour stretches at first, which meant no one slept much. Madeline stumbled through feedings and diaper changes and moments of sheer panic when the baby wouldn't stop crying. Alessandro proved surprisingly competent at handling a newborn, walking the floors at night with Sophia while Madeline got a few hours of desperately needed rest. Angela was there constantly, teaching Madeline tricks for getting the baby to burp and sleep. Maria cooked meals and left them in the fridge. Marco and the other security staff took turns checking in, bringing gifts for the baby, treating Sophia like she was something precious that belonged to all of them. It was family, messy and unconventional and built on the ruins of everything Madeline had lost, but it was family. 2 months after Sophia was born, Viktor Kozlov was indicted on multiple counts of tax evasion and customs fraud. Alessandro followed the case closely, but without personal investment. That part of his life was done. He'd sold off his last questionable asset 3 weeks earlier and was now focused entirely on the legitimate shipping operations. The money wasn't as good, but it was steady and legal, and he could sleep at night without worrying about federal investigations. No regrets? Madeline asked him one evening as they watched Sophia sleep in her crib. None. Well, maybe one. I should have done this years ago. He wrapped an arm around her waist. But then I wouldn't have had a reason to find you in that snowbank. So what I'm hearing is that almost dying in a blizzard was the best thing that ever happened to me. That's not what I said. That's what I heard. Alessandro laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Madeline had discovered he laughed more now, smiled easier, carried himself with less tension. Going legitimate had lifted a weight she hadn't realized he'd been carrying. 6 months after Sophia was born, Alessandro asked Madeline to marry him. Not with a grand gesture or expensive ring, just a quiet question one night after they'd finally gotten the baby to sleep. We're already raising a child together and living together and running a business together, he said. Seems like we might as well make it official. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. Would you prefer I get down on one knee and make a speech? No, this is perfect. Madeline kissed him. Yes, I'll marry you. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony with just staff and a few of Alessandro's business associates. Sophia was 8 months old and spent the entire ceremony trying to eat the flower petals Angela had scattered, It was chaotic and imperfect, and exactly what Madeline wanted. She wore a simple dress that accommodated the fact that she was still carrying baby weight. Alessandro wore a suit but no tie because Sofia had grabbed his tie during pictures and nearly strangled him. Angela cried through the whole thing. Marco actually smiled, which Madeline had decided was the true miracle of the day. When the officiant asked if they promised to love each other through whatever came next, Madeline thought about the snowbank where this had all started. The moment Alessandro had pulled her from death and given her a second chance at everything. "I do," she said, meaning it with every part of herself. "I do," Alessandro echoed, his hand solid and warm in hers. They honeymooned at the estate because Sofia was too young to travel and Madeline wasn't ready to be away from her for extended periods. But Alessandro had the main house prepared like a resort, candles and wine and all the privacy they could want while Angela and Maria handled baby duty for a few days. "This is nice," Madeline said, curled against him on the couch. "Domestic bliss and all that. Is it what you imagined when you left Billings that night?" "I didn't imagine anything. I just wanted to stop hurting." She looked up at him. "I definitely didn't imagine ending up married to a reformed smuggler with a baby and a found family in Montana. Life's funny that way." "Yeah, funny." But it wasn't really funny, Madeline thought. It was miraculous. The odds of everything falling into place the way it had. Alessandro being on that road the night she crashed. Him being the kind of man who'd help rather than ignore. Her staying despite every reason to run. Sofia arriving early and forcing decisions that needed to be made. Any one thing different and she'd be somewhere else, alone and struggling and missing this life she'd accidentally built. Sofia started crying from the main house. Madeline started to get up, but Alessandro pulled her back. "Angela's got her. We have 2 more hours of alone time, and I plan to use them." Bossy. "You knew that when you married me." She had. She'd known everything about him, the violence and the control and the ruthlessness. She'd known and chosen him anyway because underneath all of that was a man who'd lost everything and rebuilt himself through sheer will. A man who protected the people he loved with absolute conviction. A man who'd changed his entire life because she'd asked him to. That night, after they'd retrieved Sofia and settled her in the nursery, Madeline stood looking out the window at the estate grounds. The security lights were still there, but they felt less like prison searchlights now. They were just precautions, normal safety measures for a family living on a large property. Alessandro came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "How different everything is from a year ago. How I drove into that blizzard thinking my life was over, and instead it was just beginning." "You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to land." "We saved each other. You said I reminded you there was more to life than power and territory. That's a kind of saving, too." Sofia made a sound from the crib, not quite crying, but close. Madeline went to her, lifting her daughter and rocking her gently. Alessandro joined them, the 3 of them together in the soft lamplight. "Tell her the story," Madeline said, "about how we met." Alessandro smiled and started speaking in Italian, his voice low and melodic. Madeline didn't catch every word, but she understood the important parts. A woman lost in a storm. A man who chose to stop. 2 broken people building something whole from the fragments of what they'd survived. It was their origin story, messy and dangerous and real. Not a fairy tale with a perfect prince and a helpless princess. Just 2 people who'd found each other when they both needed saving and decided to do the hard work of building a life together. Sofia fell asleep listening to her father's voice, secure in the knowledge that she was loved and wanted and protected. Madeline held her daughter and leaned against her husband and felt something settle deep in her chest. This was home. Not the guest house or the estate or Montana, this feeling right here of being safe and seen and chosen. Of having people who'd stand beside her through whatever came next. Of Sofia growing up surrounded by love instead of the rejection her father had given her. Marcus had thrown them both away like they were nothing. Alessandro had proven they were everything. "Thank you," Madeline whispered. "For what?" "For stopping that night, for pulling me out of the snow, for every choice you made that led to this moment." Alessandro kissed her forehead. "Thank you for staying, for trusting me enough to build this with me." Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and soft, covering the grounds in white. Madeline watched it through the window and felt no fear. The snow had nearly killed her once, But it had also brought her here, to this life, this family, this future she'd never dared to dream of. She'd driven into a blizzard with nothing and come out the other side with everything that mattered. That was how the story ended. Not with perfect happiness or easy answers, but with hard-won peace and the quiet certainty that whatever storms came next, they'd weather them together. Sophia stirred in her arms, making the small sounds that meant she'd be hungry soon. Madeline settled into the rocking chair while Alessandro sat on the floor beside them, his hand resting on her knee. This was their life now. Midnight feedings and business calls and the complicated work of being a family. It wasn't the life Madeline had planned. It was better. Years later, when Sophia was old enough to ask, Madeline would tell her about the night everything changed, about the blizzard and the crash and the man who'd appeared when hope was gone. She'd tell her daughter that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places, and sometimes the scariest choices lead to the best outcomes. But mostly, she'd tell Sophia that she was loved, that she'd been wanted and fought for from the moment she existed, that the family they'd built, unconventional and imperfect and fierce, was real and lasting and worth every risk it had taken to create. Because in the end, that was what mattered. Not the beginning or the obstacles or the mistakes made along the way. Just the choice to stay, to fight, to build something worth keeping. Madeline had made that choice in a guest house in Montana, holding translations she didn't want to finish and staring at apartment listings she didn't want to pursue. She'd made it again in a hospital room, giving her daughter Alessandro's name. And she'd make it every day for the rest of her life. The choice to stay, to trust, to love. The snow fell quietly outside, covering the world in white. Inside, the lights were warm and the baby was fed and the man she loved was right beside her. It was enough. It was everything. And Madeline Carter Vieri, translator, mother, wife, survivor, was finally completely home.